Let's try it again. All right, I see everyone's like, no sound, no sound, no sound. Welcome to the live stream. Everything I said before is still true. You just missed it. I spent some time working on that introduction at the beginning of this video just to be fun. And instead, all it did was waste my time and didn't let me come up with a topic for today. So what I thought we could do instead is just talk about some new products and what's been going on the last couple of weeks here. I apologize for the lack of audio. See, I was trying to hit a button and look at the camera at the same time, and sometimes automation, right? But eventually you'd think I'd figure this out. I mean, I've only been doing this for like 4 years, right? So I am back with you. I see audio, it's bouncing up and down, and it'll just take 20 seconds for it to catch up. So let's catch up a little bit. Last Sunday, I was to give the last talk at the Mini Macna in Atlanta, Georgia. And when I did that talk, when I showed up to do it, I opened my iPad when I got there on Saturday and verified my presentation, and there was only one on the iPad. All my presentations were missing, including the one I was giving about emergencies. So I had to build a new one while I was there in my hotel room, and it came out nicely. I was happy with it. And those that were able to attend got to see it. They did not film it to share it. And I don't know, I've talked about emergencies on here enough times that I don't know that I need to give that presentation here. But I did want to just tell you that happened. While I was there, I bought some new things for myself, and I picked up some new t-shirts because I can't help it. I joked earlier this week on Facebook that I get all my new clothes when I'm at these trade shows. But I bought myself a piece of art. So I wanted to show you guys what I got. And I think this will go in the studio. Grab this razor blade. So, all right, so this is what it looks like. And it's a bunch of cutouts of shapes. Let's see if I can make this thing focus a little bit better. So you can see all the cool little corals and fish cutouts in there, and I thought this is really neat. And on the back, it's made of this kind of I don't know, fiberboard. It's even got the little thing to hang the picture. So I got this. The vendor, of course I don't remember his name by heart. And when I went to his website, under home decor, there was no product. So I will get that information for you later. I'll put it in the comments or in the video's description. So this guy was $50, and I just had to have it. And there was like 20 kinds, and I spent 15 minutes deciding what I wanted. I have just been spending money lately. So the next thing that I bought myself was a industrial gravel vac, because you know how many water changes I do, right? So anyway, this one was made by a friend of mine. His name is Kyle Shady at Aquatech, and he made this with a really thick acrylic tube with a secure PVC mount. And then on the top, you have this elbow. As you can see, I haven't used it yet. And I'll put Teflon tape on this. It'll screw in. And I can affix some hose to this. And the nice thing about this, a lot of times the tube comes straight up and over. And with the tube coming out the side, it won't be hitting my light fixture. And I can vacuum the sand bed and work my way through and around these corals and work my way through the middle of the horseshoe and very carefully not hit the acropora, and then work my way around the front here in the areas where I can. So I got this. It was very expensive compared to what you pick up at the fish store, but it should last you the rest of your life. It also has a different fitting. If you didn't want this John Guest fitting, you've got this one right here that is just a hose barb connection that would screw in and fit in the exact same spot. So I wanted to buy that. Let's see if we can get this to focus again. And I thought this is kind of cool. So basically, including shipping, one of these was $75. And I bought two of them because I wanted one for this is actually the one for the anemone cube that I'm setting up. And then I have a longer one for the reef tank where I can reach in, but it's still not so tall that it hits the light fixture on the top of the tank. So, and then this little tiny thing, I got this. Can you see that? I'm going to put my face behind it or my hand behind it so you can see it. It's a little tiny crown that's 3D printed. It's impossible to show you this thing. It's going to go on top of an urchin. I have to find one urchin and put the crown on it, let it hold on, and then go ahead and take a nice picture, because urchins pick up everything. But if I can get one shot with the crown, it was worth the trouble. And then the next thing I want to show you is this right here, which actually has a typo on it. So this is a product that is made for reactors. This should say slide lock. This is a typo with the printer, so they're replacing the card on the inside. And the way these work is you will take the reactor you own right now has the thumb screws. You'll contact him and let him know at slidelock.com what type of screws you're using, or it is using, so you can make sure to get the right ones for you. And then what you'll end up getting are these nice stainless steel screws. They're threaded just like the plastic ones you have now. They use a Allen wrench, or an IKEA wrench for some of you younger ones. And then you've got this anodized aluminum lever that will just go under it and lock the lid down. And on the other end of this thing is actually the same imprint as this, to where you could actually put it in there and you could adjust the screw slightly to get the right height so you get that proper seal. So a kit gets you all 6 or all 8 of the bolts on your reactor. Some protein skimmers, especially the larger ones, have like 15 thumb screws. And for me, the calcium reactor I've been using since 2004, whenever I do the thumb screws, I take a towel and I put it on top and I untwist it. And I put silicone grease on them to make it easier going in next time. They're still very, very difficult to put in. With these, I can just put this in forever. And then I would just literally lift the lever up and take it out and do that all the way around the reactor. Take the lid off, refill the media, or clean it out, or whatever I'm going to do. Put it back in, do the same. So I end up getting 2 of those kits. And that way I can go ahead and put one on my reactor that's for the carbon, which is desperately needed. And then the other one will be the calcium reactor. But if you were looking for something similar, instead of twisting those screws, this would be it. Now, this is a great idea, and I was trying to remember where I'd seen it before, where you have this type of tightening and then wrench it to lock it into place. And I couldn't think of where it was, but Ryan, the guy that runs the company, said, you might have seen it on the bottom of a bicycle seat. I was like, that makes sense, but I've never seen it in the aquarium trade, so this is something new and exciting. Obviously, you want to get this exactly the right height. Now, if you have a reactor with a lid that has the key locks, you'll just drop it down and twist, and the screw will be poked up, and then you'll go ahead and put the lever. But my reactors, both of them, it's just the same size hole as the bottom part. And so I will actually bore out that hole larger with a very specific bit that I happen to have. This is called a stepper bit. And I found this one specifically because each one of these notches is a 1/4 inch thick. So when I'm drilling a hole into acrylic, I want to be able to get the right size. And so the way it works is you start with the smallest, you go up and up and up to where you need it to. A lot of stepper bits that you find on the market, they're, how do I explain it? The gap is much smaller and there's a whole bunch more variations. And so you go in about 1/8 of an inch and it's already going to the next size and the next size and the next size. And I don't like that. I wanted one that had a longer push. And so in this one here, this goes from 3/16 all the way up to 1/2 an inch. And I can just take it and then put it into I put it on my drill and just drill in, and this would get me 3/16. I go to the next notch, that's 1/4 inch. Now, if I was going to 3/8, I can't do that without making one side too big. So I can go from one side and then I can go from the other side and make sure that the opening is the same size. I hope that made sense to you. But this kind of bit would really be ideal if you have to modify your reactor for this type of lever quick disconnect. But I saw it, someone posted on Instagram. I was like, that is amazing. Ryan reached out to me immediately. He's the one that made my frag rack for Caitlin that hasn't gotten wet yet. So this was a really cool frag rack to fit in the corner of the tank. And then he included something else, and I was like, what are these for? I don't understand. This makes no sense to me. So he explained, some people have frags on a little tiny tile. And they put the tile, or they put the tile on the frag rack, but it just blows off because there's no post underneath. So with this thing, you can press it into your frag rack, and you can set the tile in there, and it won't fall off. It'll stay in place. And he also made the point, I'm going to do it like this so you can see it a little bit better. he also made the point, you may have just a straight frag rack and there's not enough space. Well, because of the post on the bottom, you can just pivot it out and actually have extra space on your rack for these large tiles. So I guess he must sell these square tiles as well. He made a little tiny plastic thing. This is not 3D printed, by the way. This is injection molded. So it's been made specifically. It'll hold up durably, and it fits 1-inch square tiles. And obviously a 3/4-inch tile would fit in there as well. Some people use those. And I thought, oh, okay, this makes a lot more sense to me now. Now I get it. So you can just pop it anywhere in your frag rack, and then you can put your tile in place and it'll stay secure. So he included a couple of those for me as well, which was nice of him. So that is some of the new stuff I got this week. I feel like, at the Mini Mac, and I also picked up more dog treats. The company where I buy my Elos test kits and my Prodibio products that I saw on the website, they also have this completely natural dog food that comes from Italy. Not dog food, dog treats. That comes from Italy. And so he sent me some as a gift, and I gave them to Jack, who loved them. And so while I was there, I found more different treats, and I grabbed some more. I don't know. I've been considering, actually, if Jack would devour every single thing without question, I would say they're a massive hit, but she's a little picky. But I was halfway tempted to put them on my website in the food section for those of you that have dogs as well as having your your aquariums, and that way you could throw in an extra treat for your dog at the same time. I don't know. You have to let me know if you think it's even worth it. I'm sure you're used to getting your stuff at Target or Petco or wherever you go, Amazon. But yeah, that was pretty neat. I got a big update for the studio for all of you. So I've been working on it on and off during my free time between jobs. And I've been working really, really hard to take care of all my customers. And right now I actually have 11 customers waiting for an order. I'm very happy. I'm down to almost 10 people. And I have some things built already, and they will go out on Monday, and that'll knock my list probably in half, which would be great because I want to work on my building. And so what I did last week, I spent 2 days with a friend, and we put up all the rafters on the ceiling. And so now it is ready for the sheetrockers. And I'd gotten an initial quote from a sheetrocker a company, and the price was so high, and I just said, thank you. No way, I'll do it myself. And then he wrote me back a few days later and says, well, we've done business in the past. We'd love to have your business. And I just said, your price is so high, it makes no sense. I've already priced what sheetrock costs. I'm estimating that my sheetrock will cost me $500 to $600, and I'm not going to pay you $4,000 to install it. That makes no sense. So they came back with a much lower price and said, if you buy the materials, we'll do the labor, and we'll get it done in 3 days flat. And I was thinking how much I hate installing sheetrock. And then I was thinking how much I'm not good at tables to have splatter drag, because that's a style I like, and I want it in that building because I want the building to look nice. So I'm going to have them come out. So the sheetrock is here. There's a mountain of it in front of my house, and I've put it under a tarp in case we get some rain. And on Wednesday, they are going to show up, and they're going to go ahead and put up all the sheetrock. I'm very excited because the studio itself will be my home away from home when you think about it, and I'll be doing all my work, and all the custom acrylic stuff I do, all the orders I pack will happen in that building. And I want it to be nice. I want it to be comfortable. I want it to be spacious. I want to empty out all the stuff out of my house so my house feels like a home again and not like a place where I work all day long and sleep around the projects. So I'm very excited to get to that point. And if all goes well, it looks like I can probably be in this building by the end of the month, which will be fantastic. And if that's the case, if I'm moving everything into that building by the end of this month, it will be one huge thing off my list of things to accomplish. And then with the house half emptied out, I can go ahead and finish up what I want to do inside here, which is going to be texturing some spots where the sheetrock was mended last year, and then painting all the walls, installing new baseboard, and getting new carpet installed. And that will wrap up the bulk of the things that need to be done on this house, which will be fantastic. Then I have other little things like replacing the back doors. And I definitely want to do this really cool back area in the backyard to relax around a fire pit. But with the price of lumber, that may wait a little bit longer, and I might just have to rough it in a folding lawn chair. and hold. But yeah, there's there does seem to be an endless list, but I really want to get these things done. I'm sick of everything being half done in my house and not finished, and I'm looking forward to seeing it completed. One more piece of news, and then we'll get to your questions. Poor Jack hurt her paw a few days ago. I think what happened was, while we were going for a walk, when she's done doing number 2, she will then kick her back paws like she's trying, I don't know, it's a thing this specific species or breed of dog does, where they kick their back feet. It's not literally to cover their poop like you would think. It's just a way to throw dirt on you. And she threw all these fire ants on me, and they're like all over my shoes. I'm like, hey, I'm standing here. And she looked at her paws and said, all right, and just went about her business. We kept walking. And then I think it was the next day or the next evening, I know she was limping. And I started freaking out because I want Jack to be perfect all the time. So I ended up rushing her up to the vet, and we sat there waiting. We were there 2.5, 3 hours. And they said, oh, it's not that big a deal. Here's your medicine, and here's your bill. And I left, and I thought, man, I just spent a lot of money for what apparently is not a big deal. But the next day, she was limping even worse. Now she's holding the leg up and won't even put it on the ground. And I called the vet back, and I said, listen, I was there last night. I feel like we missed something. I think we were focused on the pad of her foot, the black parts, and not like this area next to it where the meat is. I think that's the issue. Maybe there's a splinter, maybe there's a cut, maybe there's something embedded. I don't know what. Maybe it's the fire ant poison. I don't know. So they had me come back up there again. And while we were there, the vet tech said, before we have you see the vet again, I hate to make you pay even more. And I felt like I shouldn't pay anything. I felt like I paid plenty the night before. So I just was hoping this, it's not even a follow-up. It's more like finish what we started. I didn't feel I should pay a dime. But she said, the way our business runs, you'd have to pay for this office visit. And I don't want you to have to do that. So I'm going to recommend you put this plastic collar around her neck, this cone. And so I did. And I picked up a couple more medications as well. But hopefully her paw will just completely dry out, which is what they want it to be, and keep her from licking it. And then, in a few more days, she'll be able to run around loose. She does not like looking like Pixar at all. And she gives me the look, but she's being very cooperative, which is nice. I take it off to give her a break, and we play in the backyard where she can run on the grass. And even then, she's keeping one leg up. But I think she'll be okay, and that's important. But for now, she's got her cone on. She's in the bedroom. The door's closed in case she wants to bark. But I think we'll be okay for now, and I'll give you guys an update, next week, and we'll see. Hopefully, I can tell you she's completely perfect again. So let us go look at some of your questions. Now, if you haven't done it yet, when you ask a question, please do @MeLovesReef in your comment, so that way I can find it more easily. But I'm going to start from the top and say hello to everyone. And then I apologize for the no audio for the first 30 seconds. One more time. Paul says, I can't even lip read that fast. Let's see. Get past all that. Adam says, I was giving the meaning of life during that audio segment with no audio. Let's see. Let me find you the name of that art, because I did post it on my Instagram. I think. Where else would I put it? Maybe it was on my Facebook. So the place that was selling it was called... Man, I post a lot on Facebook. Eye Candy Corals is the one that makes it. The person I bought it from, or the vendor I bought it from, is called Knockout Corals. So you can try Eye Candy Corals, that's the source, or you can get a hold of Knockout Corals, who had like 20 or 30 or 50 of them, and see what they have in stock. But Eye Candy Corals did not have them listed on their website when I checked 2 days ago. It just showed a subsection on the website. But that is where you find turtles and sharks and clownfish and I mean, there was so many things. It was so neat. I was really impressed. There was a lionfish. There was a huge whale. There was a anglerfish. And, I mean, here's the anglerfish. You can see. Anyway, I'm not going to waste your time. It was blurry. But, so there you go. Sid asks me if the clear part is PVC or acrylic. I think it's clear PVC. I didn't ask. I just saw him post that he makes them for his own shop and if anyone wanted them. And I was like, add to cart. I was like, I want this thing. I just didn't expect it to be so expensive. Honestly, I didn't. I mean, you know, and I didn't just get one. I got two. So I doubled my price and then shipping. And it just went up and up. And I was like, ugh, I already said yes, so I just paid for it. Hamada says, can you tell us your safety stop process for new fish? Be easier for you to watch the video, but I'm happy to go over it. So Safety Stop is a 2-part bath from Blue Life USA. Came out 12, 13 years ago. And the day I saw it, I was so enamored with this fantastic product. I felt like every single person should use it. And they'll never, ever have an excuse to not quarantine, because let's face it, most people don't quarantine their fish. Some people have tried quarantining, it didn't go well, and so they get frustrated and like, forget it, I'll just put the fish directly in my reef. They're going to be much happier in there. But then they have fish disease and things are dying and they're frustrated and they think, okay, maybe I should go back to quarantining. And it's a whole circle of death, circle of life situation. And Safety Stop was a product to get rid of the external parasites on your fish. So at least you're doing something, rather than just taking a brand new fish from who knows where, whether it's a hobbyist, a business, a breeder, or the ocean. Some of you are that lucky. So if you have this fish from unknown origins, because you don't know the condition of the water, you don't know what other fish it's been with. Basically, the fish STDs are floating around in that bag of water. And when you take that new fish and you acclimate it and then put it in your tank, you could actually give whatever it's carrying to the rest of your healthy fish. So when Safety Stop came out, I was really happy about this idea. And I was like, all I have to do is put it in this stuff for 45 minutes. And she says, that's right. It's part A is methylene blue. And so you take a bucket, you put 1 gallon of tank water in there, you pour in the packet, you've acclimated your fish to your aquarium water. And as soon as it's done with that, which is to match salinity and temperature, then you put it in the methylene blue solution for 45 minutes with an air stone. And I like to put in a heater because I want to make sure that the water in that bucket doesn't cool off for 45 minutes. So I get a little tiny heater. I mean, there's different kinds at Petco and PetSmart. Some look like credit cards. Some look like a little tiny, I don't know, chapstick. And they're really small. They have no thermostat. They literally are designed to keep around 75, 76 degrees. But at least that way, if you have stuff sitting in a bucket for a duration, it won't drop down to the 70s when your tank is 78. So put in that credit card heater, put in your air stone, and then observe, watch the fish. And if you have a 5-gallon bucket and you have 1 gallon of water, it's very unlikely the fish will jump out of that bucket. There's so much plastic still above, should stay in there. So you've got your fish in this bath, and then after 45 minutes, you'll scoop another gallon of water out of your tank into a second bucket. You move the heater and the air stone over, and you put in part B, which is formalin, and that's going to be a greener water. And maybe you start with the green and then you go to the blue. I might have that backwards, but regardless, there's part A, there's part B. It's very obvious on the package. And you're going to do part A first, and then you do part B. And then after that, the fish is ready to go in your tank. Now, on the package, it says it's ready to go into your quarantine tank. So you see they're trying to encourage us to use quarantine tanks. But if you're not going to do that, if you're being stubborn, at least do the 2-hour bath going through acclimation, bath A, bath B, and now goes into your tank. And ideally, I would recommend that you put it from that part B into the Peacemaker, which is an acrylic box hanging in your tank with a bunch of holes, and put a lid on top so the fish can't jump out. And that's how the ones are that I build and sell. And that way the fish can decompress and get over all the stress of being netted and netted and netted. And then after 3 days, you can pour it into the tank. And usually you won't have any fish aggression because the fish have seen each other, but they couldn't fight for 3 whole days. So that is my method that I do, and I've been doing it like that since the stuff came out. So at least 12 years. I do it with every single kind of fish I get in. I've put copper bands through it, clownfish. I've put wrasses through it. Tangs have been through it. Pajama cardinals, ORA fish, all the little ones they grow. You name it. Whatever fish I come home with, it goes through safety stop. Now, there are a couple of things you cannot put in safety stop. I think it's anything that doesn't have scales, which would mean you wouldn't put an eel through it. You probably would not put a, garden eel. Any kind of eels wouldn't go through it. And, it's always good to ask. If you have any doubts, you're getting some kind of livestock and you're not sure if you can put it in there, you can always contact Blue Life and ask them specifically for any directions, because they have to answer that question all the time. But that way you don't risk harming your new fish because you put it in when it wasn't ideal for that type of topical treatment. Now, if the fish has an internal parasite, this will not help at all. And an internal parasite usually will do a couple of things. Number one, it could impact the bowels of the fish and nothing come out of the fish and they just get sicker and sicker and they die. Or they may poop out this white stringy stuff. And unfortunately, the next fish will then go eat that white stringy stuff and now they've got the internal parasite as well and it spreads to every fish in your tank. So the reason why we recommend a quarantine tank is so if you have a fish that has this and they're pooping out white stringy stuff, they poop it out, you can net it out of the tank or siphon it out of the tank and not have it continually go through fish after fish after fish. And if the fish had just pooped it out for some reason were to eat it, maybe you'll catch it on the next pass because it's in a separate tank by itself to where you can observe, and hopefully at some point you will be able to just extract that from the system and you'll have a fish that has no internal issues whatsoever. There are medicines that you can buy that you can have the fish eat to help deal with internal parasites, but safety stop is not one of them. So I'm not a fish disease person. I would point you to Humble Fish for any kind of help. And I was just looking through my list here. Is it hiding? Did I lose my list? I had this really cool thing on my screen before. And now it's gone. Let's do this. Maybe it's this. Nope, it's not that. Oh. Can't even find it. It completely has eluded me. That's weird. Well, anyway. Humble.fish is the website you go to, and he talks about all the fish disease. Adam says, have your urchins grown? I got mine at the same time, and they're 2 to 3 times the size when I got them. Best cleanup crew member of the green hair algae, in my opinion. Yeah, they've grown. I don't think they're full adult size yet. I was told within 2 months they'll be full size, but they definitely are larger. They're really cute, and I find them everywhere, but I don't find all of them. I bought 11. All right, I put in 11, and I saw 1 empty shell, so I should have 10. But the most I've been able to count at one time, walk in the tank over and over and over was 8. So hopefully I have 10 of them still. But I really do like them. Eli's Fish says, how do you help an urchin that's not doing well losing its spines? That's a tricky one. I think usually when you're at that point, it's already on its way out. I am trying to think if I've ever heard of anyone saving an urchin, but I think once you've usually seen that, it's too late. Now, urchins need food. If your urchin cannot find sufficient food, I don't know if it would give it the droopy quills, so to speak, that you're describing. Like I said, I mean, they just either something bit it, attacked it, harmed it, or it's just rotting from the inside out. If the tank gets too hot, if the salinity changes rapidly, these are things that can affect livestock like urchins. Certain invertebrates are more sensitive than others. I don't know that you could just set it on a sheet of nori and it would suddenly do better all of a sudden. I really don't know. The occasional time I've seen an urchin not doing well, by the time I noticed it, it was too late. So if you find out something that can help them do better, let me know so I will have the answer to that question for someone else one day. Dave says, do you think it's harmful to do too many water changes, like 30 to 40% per week? Well, there would be different reasons why someone might do that. So, for example, if you had a tank that has zero filtration, there's not one reactor hanging on it, no skimmer, no nothing. It's just a block of water, and you're scooping out water and putting in new water because you have a bunch of fish that eat really messy foods that pollute the water like crazy. Big water changes could make sense. If you're doing it because you're scared of the tank growing algae, then you may be overreacting, because algae needs some nutrients to grow, but it's also part of a natural ecosystem. And if you were to dive any reef, you will see some algae with the corals. It will not be a pristine museum exhibit. Normally, general rule of thumb is change 25% of the water in your reef tank once a month. Now, it's super old school thinking, but it worked. And there's a lot of people these days that have tanks that started with dry sand, dry rock. They introduced a little bit of bacteria, or they introduced some ammonia, and that's it. And then they added a coral, some fish, and some food, and they're dealing with dinoflagellates because they have zero nitrate and zero phosphate. And doing a lot of water changes on top of that will not help increase nitrate and phosphate. If you had a tank that's 10 years old and you're like, look, the water's so bad and the tank is so overgrown with algae, I'm going to start doing these massive water changes to really turn it around. See, that's another reason for big water changes that would make sense. But would you do it nonstop forever? No. You would do it as needed for the specific need that the tank is demanding at that time. When I had purchased a used 55-gallon aquarium, and I measured the nitrate, and it was 200. And I thought, wow, I need to change this water, but I don't want to shock the inhabitants. So what I did was I took a big barrel of salt water and another big barrel next to it, and I did a series of small water changes into the barrel, mixing it with the new water and pumping that back in. And I was kind of changing the water in shifts over the period of like 2 or 3 hours to get the nitrates down. And I ended up bringing them down, from 200. I think when I was done, they were down to 80. And then I did the same thing like a week later, and then I got them down to, 20s, 30s, something like that. But if you have a tank that's doing really well and you're just doing big water changes because it's a thing that freshwater people do, you don't need to. You just need to do just what the tank needs. My tank behind me, which by the way, I've got it in this pretty purplish glow behind me. It's completely out of focus. Let me stand back. So my reef right now is in Dwayne's lighting mode. He calls this something like evening mode or something. And I said, I'll do something a little different. So it's kind of purple on camera. To the eye, it's actually pretty pleasing. It's definitely in the blue. It's not quite that purple, but I thought that would look kind of nice for today, so I went ahead and did that. My tank, the last water change was in January, and I just checked my salt water. The alkalinity in that barrel that's been mixed now for weeks was measuring 6.5, so I buffered it up to 9.5, so it matches my tank. And today I'm going to try out my Gravel Vac, and I'm going to go ahead and do a small water change, maybe 50 gallons or so. And that's on a 450-gallon system, so that's not very much. And I will probably, I think I'm going to do a couple of those smaller water changes over the next few weeks, because I'm looking at my SPS corals and they're alive and they're pretty, but I feel like they're stagnant, like they're not growing. And so I already sent off an ICP test a few days ago, so I'll get my results here in a few more days. And that'll tell me what may be lacking in the water column. It might be trace elements. I don't know. I haven't done anything other than feed the tank and make sure there's top off and clean the skimmer. And I was able to clean the algae turf scrubber that I couldn't get to because of the temporary anemone cube situations behind the reef. And Chris came over and he helped me move the tank out of the way to get that drawer out. And because it sat there for so long uncleaned, that a lot of my good algae has died off. And so I don't know. We'll have to see what grows back, if anything, or if I have to start from scratch again with some hair algae and thread it onto the mat again. But while that tank's in my way, it's kind of impossible to deal with anyway. So I am hoping to take care of my customers. They will work on the building. Maybe I can build the stand for the aquarium while they're working on that this week, so I can get the new 60-gallon running. So I'd like to just get it hooked up and running, and don't move the livestock over. Just leave everything where it is in the fish room, but have that become part of the ecosystem. So now my 450 gallons will be like 510 gallons of water, or 500 gallons of water, and just let it be its thing. And then one day start moving all the livestock back into the cube and get it going. So that'd be really exciting, and that should happen in the coming weeks. I got to build the stand. I want to make a matching canopy that will hide the radion light so I don't have to see the blue light in my eyes anymore. And I need to paint it. And I'm debating what color to go with, because whatever I'm going to do on the anemone cube will also be the woodwork on this tank behind me. And now that I have this deep brown wood floor, wood plank floor, and I've got gray walls, I'm thinking it's going to have to be white, which I don't really want to do, but I don't think brown on brown is the right move. I mean, I would have gone with walnut. I think cherry wood would look kind of weird, so I don't want to do that. I definitely don't want to do a gray wash. I don't like that look. I already have gray on the walls. I don't need gray on the woodwork. So I'm kind of thinking white. But then I'm planning to remodel the kitchen at some point with new cabinetry. When I do that, I was kind of thinking white. So I don't know if that's just too much white. I don't know. So lots of decisions need to be made. I'm going to have to commit to something soon because I got to get those clowns and anemones back into their beautiful spot where you guys can enjoy them again. Ghouls says, what are your thoughts on using plant fertilizer, calcium nitrate, as a way to raise nitrate? You know, I don't know what is in Neo Nitro from Brightwell. And maybe it is plant nitrate. I don't know. I do know for a while there, people were using tree stump remover as a way to raise nitrate in their tanks. And they would just buy something, you know, from Home Depot and figure out what seemed to work. So when Neo Nitro came out and Neo Phos came out, which were ways to dose a little bit of nitrate and phosphate, I thought, sounds much safer. It's got a recipe on the bottle to tell you how much to use. You can follow the information and be safe in what you're dosing. And that's why I sell that one from my website. When I was working on my tank last year and had an issue, I literally dosed some nitrate and I used Neo Nitro for, I don't know, a few days, a week, just enough to make sure my nitrates didn't get too low. They were coming down really hard and fast, and I thought, okay, we're where I want to be, and they kept going. I was like, stop! So I actually dosed, which was hilarious. A lot of people made fun of me because I'm the king of nitrate. And here I was in a situation where I was actually getting below 10, which was a big distance from 80. So when I saw them getting to 10 and they were heading south, I thought, nope, I'm going to dose. I'd rather keep them at 15 and lock them in there. And that was, I don't know, 6 months ago now, and my nitrates are measuring 20. So I'm very happy with that number. I don't really think I need to have them much lower than that. But of course, if I step up some water changes, they may come down a little bit. So if they come down 10 or 15, that's fine now. But they were 80, and then within a very short period, I had them at 60, and then I had them at 35, and then suddenly I had 15 and then 10. It was kind of coming down really quickly, and I didn't want to lose my livestock. And I just felt like it was too much change, that because they were so used to 80 for so long, that I wanted to lock it in at a number that still had some nitrate present. And so I used a product that you can buy in a bottle that is made for the aquarium trade. So if you're trying to use something else, some kind of plant fertilizer, you're using it at your own risk. Maybe you can't get Neo Nitro where you live, and I understand that happens because this is an international show, so I understand it. But if you can get your hands on something that is made for us, I feel like it's a little safer, usually. Super dope frag rack. Yeah, this frag rack was so pretty. It was a gift given to me last year by Ryan, same company from Slide Lock. See, here's the name of the company right here. It says Slide Lock. And it will fit in the corner of the tank on 2 walls. And I know it'll fit in the anemone cube perfectly because that's going to be a thinner acrylic or thinner glass walls. I don't know, and I never tested it because I never want to get it wet. I'm so bad. But I know Ryan's here today. But he did ask me to try put it on my 3/4 inch glass and see if it'll stay. And it may stay until you start putting a bunch of frags on there and maybe it becomes too heavy. I don't know. But the gift still counts, and you know, it still has her name on it. It says Caitlin's Corner. It's really, really pretty. And so it still means a lot to me, even though it's not in a tank getting coralline algae all over it. And it says her name on both sides, so you can flip it over either direction. Alex says, does it take more responsibility to have a dog or a reef tank? You know, that's a great question. Let me tell you a story. You know, I'm always telling you guys stories. Years ago, there was a guy in our club who loved clams, and he bought clams all the time. Lots of them. At one point, I went to visit him, and he had 30, 40, 70 clams. Crazy amounts. I mean, he was just buying them. He loved them. He loved the different looks, the different colors, the different shapes of the shells, and his tanks were just filled with clams. It was his passion. And he came over one day and came with his spouse. And we were having a conversation, and he mentioned that a lot of the clams had died, and he was getting more. And somehow, I don't know what happened, but I just kind of reacted and just spoke completely out of turn. I'm usually a little bit more diplomatic in what I say, but I was kind of really offended that he had killed all these clams and was buying more to replace them like they were M&Ms, you know? And I do realize we have aquaculture clams, and we have companies that are growing clams from nothing into baby clams that become bigger clams to the point where you can buy them and they're beautiful, right? I understand that. However, at this time, we're talking so long ago, I don't know that that was happening yet. Like with ORA, I don't think they're making clams yet. I think they're still just dealing with captive bred fish. So there were certain areas where if you bought clams, they were sure to come with a disease. And when you put that in your tank, all your healthy clams got sick, just like talked about fish with Safety Stop. And, you know, in the earlier part of this live stream. And so you put in these clams you just acquired from, I don't know, wherever they're from. Let's just say South Korea. I can't remember the country, the ocean that it came from. But this area, wherever they came from, it was well known that you'd get sick clams that would typically die. And he was buying all these clams from that area. He put them in his tank, and it wiped out most of his collection. And it was really bothered me. Because to me, the things that come from the ocean are finite. It's not infinite. It doesn't mean you can always find more in the ocean. The more that's taken from the ocean, the more we deplete what's in the ocean. And so I love captive bred fish rearing. I think it's great. And I love that we can frag corals and get them from other hobbyists and not take a coral out of the ocean necessarily, which we used to have to do. So these are all good things. And now, yes, we can get clams from clam farms. So whatever, maybe my argument's stupid at this point. But at the time, he said how all these clams died, and he was just going to replace them with more. And I just said, if those were puppies, and they had all died, there'd be someone with a badge beating on your door saying, "What are you doing?" And his spouse just kind of looked at me and mouthed the words, "Thank you," to me from across the room. And then I realized what I just said, and I was like, hey, I'm sorry, but that many clams dying is just not right. And, you know, I kind of just dropped the topic. But the thing is, if you knew someone that loved puppies, and suddenly they killed 15 of them, and they said, I'll just get 7 more, you would say, what are you doing? What on earth happened? So, which is more important? We tend to think of animals that have, you know, fur and 4 legs in our homes to be super important. People call them their fur babies. They spend so much money with the vet to make sure they're healthy and that they're lavish with toys and treats and good food. And we go to a lot of attention. And a lot of times people feel very disconnected from fish. And they say it's just a fish tank. Or these, you know, why are you acting like these fish are so important? Or, you know, sometimes you have a spouse that's like, you know, jealous of your aquarium. And, you know, will say you spend too much time with your tank and not enough time with me. I mean, these arguments, some of you have heard these. But the point is that a lot of times we think of pets in our homes, that kind, whether it's a bird or, I don't know, lizards and snakes. You know, I'm not into that. But the different kinds of creatures you can have in your home versus what's in a glass box, you may not feel the same passion. For me, I love all the things that come from the ocean. I love the ocean very much. I have been snorkeling my whole life. I've been diving for the last decade. I've gotten to go to some really nice places around the world in my life. And I really do appreciate what we get. And I'd like to even before this ever happened, I remember once I had this one coral in my tank. It wasn't doing well. And I said to myself, what if this is the last one on the planet and there's none to be taken from the ocean? And what if we need some one day to put back in the ocean? So I need to do everything I can to save this one coral. And it was just some fleeting thought that kind of stuck with me, that I should not let this hammer coral perish. I should make sure that it's okay and take good care of it, and show it the proper husbandry, and really give it some dedication, and and nurse it back into health. And every one of us has to look at our own hobby how they see fit. But I do feel that the more in tune you are with your reef, the more invested you are in the health of your creatures, the better your husbandry will be. If you really care about what's happening inside your glass box, you're going to test your water every single week because you want to make sure they stay healthy. Just like if you have a dog and you have a bowl of food and a bowl of water, you wash the bowl out and make it nice and clean before you put new water on top, because you don't want your dog to get some horrible bacteria and get some kind of sickness and get sick and possibly even die. It's the same principle. It's just a different animal. So I would say responsibility, we all look at them in different ways. Some of us think this is just a passing hobby. I just want to do something for fun and relaxation. I don't want to get into all this hardcore stuff, and that's fine too. But if you're watching this channel, maybe you're a little bit more hardcore than you think. And maybe you really do want to do more, but maybe don't have the time for various reasons. Your job, your career, your job, your family, your children, sports, that the kids have to go to, whatever it is. Or just there's so much going on in your life that you just cannot do it. And that's okay. But if you can, one of the things that we always want to do is always strive to improve what we do. And we want to get better at what we do. So even if you're not doing all the things right now, if you're doing some of the things now and you add one more thing this week, you're going the right direction, just like I do. And I'm constantly looking at myself and I'm analyzing how I'm doing things, and I look at how I'm tired. I want to watch this TV show. Well, hang on, let me clean out that skimmer because it's about to overflow. Or, I just want to relax. Oh, wait, I've got to melt some fish food. There's always something. I jump up and out of my chair so many times a day. It's crazy when I'm, done with work. And so I find that it's just one of those things where you will put in a certain amount of energy, and then sometimes somebody like me may guilt you a little bit to do a little bit more, but it's all for the right reasons. I don't personally benefit from you being a better hobbyist, but I love being able to help you become a better hobbyist. And so if I can give you a few words to inspire you or to lecture you slightly, and you're willing to listen, that's great. And if you're not, that's your freedom of choice too. Let's see. Hi, Seth's daughter. I saw you at Mini Magna. Did you ask a question up above that I didn't answer? I don't see it. Maybe it's coming up. I met Seth years ago, her dad. Super nice guy. And he was at Mini Magna too. Adam says, concrete patios cost as much as a wood deck nowadays. Okay, so here's what I want to do. Since we're killing time together, I want to have this really nice, longer deck that touches the house. It goes from, I have a shed right here, and I want it to go out into the lawn. And I really would like it to be kind of the shape of a jelly bean, at least on one side. It's going to be rectangular touching the house, obviously. But I'd like it to be rounded rather than just a big rectangle, because I think everything's square in my backyard. My house is square, my building is square, the patio is square. I'd like that to be rounded. And I'd like a path that goes off to the new studio. And I'd like another path to split off of it and go around a fire pit. And then my friend busted out Photoshop, and he drew a pergola next to the fire pit that had a floating round bed that just lets you lay there and look up at the stars or enjoy a breeze while you're reading Coral Magazine or whatever it is you do. And I was like, now I want all of that. But I don't even know what that lumber would cost me to pull that off. But I love the idea of it. And see, for me, forever, my backyard has been grass. I have a huge back area behind my house. And I always thought, one day I'm just going to put a whole new house back there, and I'm going to level this house completely and have the biggest front yard ever. But I didn't think the city would give me permission to do that. So in the meantime, I mean, I could have a huge swimming pool back there, and I don't. And while a pool would be nice, I don't want one. I don't want the risk that, the potential risk of something being hurt if they fell in. I know there's all these rules about putting up fences and worrying about the filtration and all that. And then how often would I really get in and use it? I just don't see myself as being a person that buys a $50,000 pool or whatever they cost and then swims every single day and gets super healthy. I just don't see myself doing that. It's boring. There's nothing to see. Okay, there's no flame angel down there. So if I can have a nice deck to grill on and a few places to sit and enjoy a drink, and if I had a fire pit, that would be really nice. And so my friend AJ said, why don't we put the fire pit way out in the middle of the lawn? I was like, why? Why would I do that? And he says, well, why wouldn't you? And I'm like, it's my lawn. He goes, yeah, but why do you need so much lawn? And I started to realize I don't really need all that lawn. I love it. It's wide open and spacious, but it serves no purpose other than for me to go back and forth a lawnmower every week, which I did yesterday. But with he drew this design in Photoshop where it did all this stuff. And I was like, man, and it really eats up the yard, but there's still plenty of grass. And it kind of made it like an attraction. Like wow, this is really cool. And I was thinking, he's on the right path. I need to change the way I think and expand my mind a little bit to accept this. But what he drew was, not only did he do the fire pit and the pergola and all that, he also drew in what looked like a $40,000 pond with a waterfall at one end. And then there was another spot with table and chairs, and there was another spot with like a bench and a big old beach umbrella. And I was like, now I want all those things. But I don't want to pay for all those things. So I think I'll start off with maybe a fire pit out there and then work my way out there. We'll see. And then as Will said, you got quite the remodeling going on there. I was like, yes, I know. And I'll be glad when it is finally completed. It would be nice to get everything buttoned up. But I mean, when all these things are done, then the last thing would be to tackle the kitchen. The kitchen's actually totally functional and doesn't need to be changed. It's just super old, and I'm ready to change it because I've been here for a very long time. And so I'd like to make it nicer. And it's not needed to happen this year. It could be a next year project, And that way I could get a break from all the constant changes that have been going on here. Adam says, have you ever dosed potassium? Have you ever been on my channel? He said, I hear it's especially good for acros to be at 400 ppm. All right, Adam, I'm going to pretend you're asking this facetiously and that you know nothing about my history, because I have been preaching potassium for probably the last 7 months. And before that, I never gave it an ounce of thought. I never cared about it. I never tested for it. I didn't care about it. I mean, like with reading, it's like, okay, that's the number, so what? But last year, when I had a big issue in my reef tank, and I sent off 6 different ICP tests to identify the cause, it turns out I was at a very low point of potassium. The salt mix was deficient in it. And I fixed my tank by literally dosing potassium. My tank was measuring under 200 ppm, and I spent, I think, 3 weeks dosing a total of 3 liters of potassium in the tank. And everything that survived turned around and got better. And corals like this green one here was bone white. This one here was bone white. This one here, it turned completely brown. And they all have their colors now. And there was a whole bunch of stuff that died. And there was a whole bunch that lived that didn't care about potassium at all. But yeah, potassium should be at 400 as a bare minimum, just like calcium. We usually shoot 375 to 450. Potassium is actually much more important than I ever knew. And now I've been completely converted. So I have a bottle connected to a dosing pump. Currently it's off because my last test was 435, I believe. And so I didn't see the need to keep putting it in the tank. But if I do a test and it comes, or the ICP is about to come back. When I get that, it'll tell me potassium levels. And that may dictate whether I turn on that dosing pump and get some more into the tank again. Jaws Reef, I'm glad you're here for the live stream. Skinner says, I have an algae-eating nudibranch today. It's very cool. Are you familiar with these? Is it a lettuce nudibranch? Because if it is, those do like to eat bryopsis specifically. May help a little bit with hair algae. Maybe you have something different. But the lettuce nudibranchs are really, really pretty. And they are super buoyant. They're so light. They're like holding a feather in a water full of flow. So when I had one in the past, I'd put it on top of the bryopsis to eat the algae. And then the next day, I'd find it stuck to the intake grate of my Tunzi power head. And I would turn off the power head and I'd peel that little guy off, which is like peeling off, I don't know, nothing. I just get this little fluffy thing and I try to hold it in my hand and it's trying to fall through my fingers, you know, and I'm just kind of like keep my hand together and move it across and put it back on the bryopsis. And the next day I found it down in the refugium of the sump and I'd take it out of there and put it back in the tank on the bryopsis and hold my hand there until it latched on again. But they can blow around really easily. A little bit of flow can just knock them right into the water column. Lucas says, I'm using T5s and metal halide combo, and I love it, and I don't want to go back to LEDs ever again. And it's not a question. All right. I understand. When I switched mine to LEDs, I saved my metal halides just in case. I still have them in the back room eating up a lot of space. I think I will, as I declutter the house, they will go in that attic area of the new building because I have that storage space. And it's the perfect place. It's clean, it's dry, and I can just put things that I may never use again up there. But if I ever want to, I can pull up, you know, I can crawl up there and get them down. Nick says, our parameters are out of whack. My calcium is at 520. Yeah, it's too high. Alkaline is being dosed daily to 9 DKH. I'm having to dose magnesium up weekly from 1250 to 1350. Magnesium is expensive to dose at 10C a week. Any suggestions? 10C, 10 cents? 10, I don't know what that is. But magnesium shouldn't cost that much. I use something called Magnesium Pronto. I sell it on my website. I think a jar of it is like $22, and it makes almost 5 gallons of magnesium chloride and magnesium sulfate. It's a combination and Hydra solution. And I've been using that exclusively for my tank for the last 4 or 5 years. I mix up basically almost a gallon at a time, and I set up to a dosing pump that pushes in about 90 milliliters a day until the jug is empty. And when it's empty, I fill the jug up with new RO water. I stir it all up. And then I put it back in there. And the next time, which is like now, this weekend, my jug is empty. And a friend gave me a magnetic stirrer. He got one from Amazon and something was wrong. So they sent him another one. So he had an extra. He goes, do you want this? And I was like, okay. So it's about this big, maybe a little smaller. And then there's a little case. And inside the case you open up, there's like 5 different size beads. One's really big and all the way down to the little cute ones. And it even came with these little plastic tweezers to get them out of the case. And so I used it the other day to mix up some baked baking soda and a cup of RO water because I was buffering. And I was like, man, this was awesome. I just spun it up. I didn't have to do the thing with a plastic spoon, right? I just stirred it. And I thought, ooh, I bet that'll be fun to mix my magnesium with. So I will be doing that this weekend to mix up a batch. But magnesium shouldn't cost you that much. Depends what kind you're buying. There are these DIY mixes that you can buy. And like I said, Magnesium Pronto is what I use. That's what I've been recommending for a long time. I feel like you get a lot of magnesium for the amount of money you're spending compared to other stuff on the market that you get a pouch that makes 1 gallon and might cost you, I don't know, 12 bucks or so. But stop dosing calcium. That's for sure. Your calcium is too high at 520. You might want to measure your next batch of new mixed salt water and see what the calcium level of that is to make sure it's lower than your tank. Because if you keep putting in the same amount, your number will never come down. Got You says, I recently upgraded from a 45 to an 80-gallon saltwater tank, and I'm having some analysis paralysis on a DC return pump and Rockscaping Inspiration and ideas. Well, I kind of get you on that one because every decision I make in my new building, where I'm going to put the outlets, how I'm going to run the wires through the walls, all that, I keep analyzing and debating and paralyzing myself too, because I'm like, well, what if that's the wrong choice? Once the sheetrock's up, I can't change it. You know, I want to get it right the first time. And you want to get your tank to be right for the first time as well. So when it comes to a DC return pump, you got a lot of choices. I would basically say, you know, to look at some of the reviews or talk to some hobbyists that have that pump. There's a lot of groups, including Club Mueller's Reef on Facebook, where you can ask your questions, and others that own that pump can tell you it was a great pump or it was a disaster, and I would never recommend that pump to anyone. You know, that way at least you're kind of rooting out the one that is a bad choice. Myself, I have a very expensive DC return pump. It's the Abyss. Comes with a 10-year warranty. I never have to think about it. And on some rare occasions, I actually slow the flow way down because it's DC. Before that, I just had a Sequence Dart pump, which is a large external pump. And when I wanted to slow the flow, I closed the ball valve. And that would, the pump's still going at 100%. You know, it's still the same amount of power consumption, if not more, because now I'm restricting the output. And it's fighting against that restriction. But that's how I slowed the flow in the tank. Now I can just push some buttons on the driver and slow it down or increase it to get that ideal flow rate through my tank. And I'm very happy with that choice. And that's one of the only reasons I like DC pumps. Now, what I would love to see DC pumps have in the future, and there may be some that have it now, but I'm not familiar with any of them yet. I would love to see some DC-powered return pumps have the ability to be hooked up to a battery backup directly without having to have AC converted to DC. So in other words, you've got your AC brick, you know, like you do for a laptop computer, or half the pumps we use, like Vortec pumps, and I'm trying to think, you know, there's a lot of different things we buy that have a power brick, and that's AC, and it converts it to DC. And then my Vortec pumps, they have an extra outlet on the driver that will let me just run battery power without having to do the conversion, because you're wasting a lot of power to do the conversion. So I would love to see DC pumps like the Abyss and, you know, whatever is sold from CoralView or whatever brand you're thinking of. I'd love them to have an extra port on them where we can just have battery feed it during a power outage and keep the pump running without having to do the whole inversion to 120 volt down to 20 watts, whatever it is your pump needs. Now, Rockscaping Inspiration, keep it natural. And a lot of people are doing all kinds of crazy ornate stuff. They're trying to do spindly little wispy sticks. And I feel like you need to have some decent rock in there for hidey holes for fish to sleep in, to use as protection, you know, to dart into and hide. And I find that when tanks have literally nowhere for something to hide, that might look cool aesthetically, but it's not good for the fish. They all need their spots. And I'll tell you, a lot of fish like to congregate inside this one horseshoe right here. The rock does this and comes around like that, and there's a hole in the center. There's no flow in there, and I will see all the tangs gather in there. I will see the pajama cardinals gather in there. I'll see the blood shrimp are hanging out in the back looking for snacks. So it's good to have spaces where they can just literally go off and hide if they feel the sudden urge. So I would consider that. If you are going to work with all dry rock, you can definitely combine it. You can use different cements to glue them together into permanent structures. And then when you put them in your tank, you have this really cool like arm sticking out. There was this one neat trick that Terrence did on his reef tank. He's got like a 450 or 500 or something. And he likes to use cantilevering. So he set up his initial aquascape, and then he would get a big branching rock of some kind. Usually Tonga branch is what we think of but I don't know that we can get that. But maybe you can buy fake Tonga branch these days, you know, that's made by the different companies that make dry rock. And he would put in the end into the rock and let the branch stick out. And then he'd plant his SPS on there. And then when he needed a new spot, he'd plant another one in there, and it would lodge into the core and come out and become this big long twig in a different direction. And he grew acros on there as well, or zoanthids could be all over the branches, whatever it is, the kind of corals you like. So you can kind of think ahead, how could I somehow insert a new structure into an existing aquascape? Might be something worth considering. And I'll tell you one thing that's really important that you could do, no matter what your aquascape is, before you get the tank running. When you've got your your layout figured out. Maybe you laid it out on the ground or on your table or in the tank, and you said, okay, I love this look, and you take pictures and videos, and you're like, this is what I want to do when I'm ready to set it up. I would say the top rocks, the ones at the peak of your aquascape, I would drill a lot of 1/4-inch holes in it. And the reason I would do that is then you can take a piece of, I'm just going to hold it with a screw here, okay? You're going to take a piece of airline tubing and some putty, and you will put the putty on there, so it's basically this shape, right? I feel like I'm out of focus again. All right, so you've got your airline tubing, just a short piece, the rigid kind, not the flexible stuff. Rigid piece of airline tubing, a little piece of putty on top, and then you mount your coral in there, and then you can put this in any of those 1/4-inch holes you drilled in your rock. And so if you have a rock with like, rock aquascape with like 20 holes in it, and you get a new frag, you can put one right here, and then you can put one right here, and then if this one grows too quickly, you can take it out of that hole and put it in this hole over here and let it continue to become a big, huge colony while this one's taking its sweet time. And then at some point you might say, oh, I'd rather have this one over here because I have too many greens in one spot. And you just pull them out of these holes and put them in other holes. So by perforating your aquascape, the top parts, or the top of the top area of any rock you have in your tank where you think you're going to put corals, you can create these little spots. And it's a really nice way. And the term for this crazy way of mounting corals is called pegging. So if you would like to peg your corals, you would have all these holes all in your aquascape, and then you can just put them wherever you like them and change them as needed. Very, very convenient. Hard to do once your tank is running. So that could be a cool thing to do. And if most people don't do it. My tank has a lot of those holes because I did that a long time ago. So as I change things up, I usually have all these little holes available. I also like to use putty and super glue gel to secure my corals, because once they're in the tank, I want them to stay very, very still. This in the flow, and I mean is wiggling and rocking on the aquascape, tends to not grow as quickly because it's shaking. It doesn't know what to do with itself. So you want to make sure it's secure and staying put. Also, that helps with things like urchins that are working their way through the tank. They can't knock it loose or take it away and carry it somewhere else if it's been connected to the rock work. The pegging, where you have like an 1.5 inch long stem going into the rock, should keep it there in place. But if for some reason something did pull it out, like a hippo tang or an urchin or something, you can always retrieve it and put it back in a hole or a different hole in the tank. It's a very nice way to do things. And then, of course, you can secure it permanently with more putty if you felt the need. Eli's Fish says, I just received the Reef Enhanced. Thank you. I hope my pods explode. Now that I'd like to see on video. Insane Reefer says, I have something on my sand bed that looks like hairy diatoms. I don't think it's dinoflagellates because it doesn't have bubbles on it, but I do think they're photosynthetic. Do you have any tips? You may need to just do some general cleaning, and obviously we want to make sure that you are not bottomed out on phosphates and nitrates. Just can't emphasize that enough, especially in tanks where it was dry sand and dry rock to begin with. You need the biodiversity, and your tank just doesn't have it. And so it goes through these ugly phases. Be glad it's not dinoflagellates. That's important. Diatoms will be consumed by bacteria, so that's good. You could try live rock enhance in your tank. That would help defeat some of that in the tank and kind of grow more bacteria that's good for eating waste and decay. That's a really smart thing to do. And it can actually help seed the rock work with more bacteria at the same time. Sean says, can you tell us how big the fish trap is on your website? Would Spock fit it if you put some bananas in there? I actually build those custom, and I've been debating about just taking them off the website entirely because people have to wait. But with the new building, maybe I'll have more flexibility to where I can stay on top of things and make them more readily. But there's different ways to secure them on the tank. One would be some kind of a bracket, cross brace that they hang from in the tank. Another could be held onto the glass with magnets. I have made larger ones. I've made thinner ones. I've made this long. I've made them taller because everyone has different size fish. So the one that's on my website right now, I don't think Spock would fit in it, and I definitely don't think she'd fit in there with some bananas, because some bananas takes a lot of space. But I have caught her in my original fish trap that I made once and just refuse to throw away. I really should throw it away. And that one, the box is 12 inches long. It has a door that comes down like a guillotine, and it has this big ugly thing that I screw it to the top of my tank, and because it's only in the tank for the amount of time it takes to catch the fish. And I've been able to catch fish out of my tank when needed, usually in under 10 minutes. I set up the trap in the tank. I like to put it in the tank like 2 or 3 days before I'm going to catch the fish without the door. So it's just a box with an opening, sort of like a garage, right, with no garage door. And it's just sitting in there doing nothing for 3 days. And you can then even throw food in there if you want to kind of entice the fish to swim in and out of it during that 3-day period. And then on day 3, I put the door in place, and I have a long piece of fishing line, and I go way across the room, and I will wait with my finger on the string, just like a fisherman. And I wait and wait for the right fish to go in, and when it goes in, I will then quickly lessen the grip on that door so it drops. And the trap that I make on my website has a pivoting door. So instead of having to, lessen and hope the door falls, you pull the string and the door will pivot shut. And it's cool because it pivots from the center. So the door doesn't have to come all the way closed. Instead, it's pivoting. It goes shoop and just shut. You got to open, and then like this, it closes. It's like a quarter turn to block the fish from getting out. And Spock has fit inside my fish trap each time. She is about the length of it, but a fish isn't rigid straight all the time. It kind of bends a little bit. The trick is when you take a trap out of the tank, normally you would have to stand it up on its end to keep the water in so it doesn't spill out everywhere, right? Because the end is open. And so now the box is even smaller. So if you are trying to catch a large fish, you probably want a big enough trap. Also, at one time when I had a big leaking tank behind me and I had to deal with removing the fish, another thing you can do if you don't want to actually invest in a fish trap is you can use a spare aquarium, especially on a big tank like mine. And I could literally put in, I had like a 14-gallon quarantine tank. It was all made of acrylic, so it was clear. And I just set it down in the tank on the bottom in the corner with a huge opening, which was the opening on the top of the tank. I set it in there, and I just kind of encouraged the fish to swim into that clear box. And then I just took the box and I tilted it up and lifted it out of the tank. It was heavy. I had to pour water out and not pour the fish out. But that's one of the ways I got Spock out when the 400-gallon leaked, because she was one of my biggest fish at the time. But yeah, so there's some answers for you. It's funny you mentioned the fish trap because it's one of the ones that it's kind of a pain to build. I wish I could come up with a slightly better construction method for the door itself. That's the hardest assembly of the entire thing. But it works really, really well. I just wish I could make it in a better way. Maybe I should get the door made by somebody else, like some kind of 3D printed thing or something that then fits into my acrylic box. I don't know. But it's or maybe something I can put on the ends that's 3D printed, some kind of an insert, so I could like pop the doors into place. That'd be cool. Maybe I'll talk with Antonio from VCA and see if we can come up with something that would make my life so much easier. Because other than that, the rest of it's pretty easy to make. I am Aquano says, I'm just wondering if it's safe to add dry cycled rock to display tank, even though there's phosphate reading of 0.06. That dry rock has been cycled for about 2 months. Yeah, if the rock's been in salt water for a couple of months, just sitting there doing its thing, fermenting, so to speak, you can definitely put it in your tank now. I don't like putting dry rock brand new into an existing setup without putting it through a couple of months in salt water. So yes, you can go ahead and do that, and that's completely safe. And it won't do anything because there's nothing about it. Yes, dry rock may leach out some phosphates out of it. That's kind of normal. And depending on how you want to handle it, if it was a lot of phosphate coming out of this rock, you had a whole bunch, you could then use something like Phosphate RX or maybe Brightwell E or whatever product you like to help remove the phosphate before, so when you finally test the rock. But 0.06 is really nothing. It's really, really low. So I wouldn't be too worried about that. If it was coming in at like 1.0, 3.0, some high number, I could see you saying, I really don't like this rock in my tank because my tank is great. But if you're coming in at 0.06, you can move it into your tank and use it. Insane Reefer says I'm dosing bacteria and removing this stringy stuff daily. That sounds good. And you know, Microbacter 7 does help clear up the brown stuff on the sand bed. So I'd mentioned Live Rock Enhance. You might try Microbacter 7. I don't know what bacteria you're using. Maybe you're doing that already. We don't want to use too much. We don't want to fuel some crazy growth. On my big tank, this one behind me, when I was dosing it, I think I was putting in like 9 milliliters a day, which seemed like nothing for the size of my tank because it was 1 milliliter per 50 gallons of water, I believe. Paul says, seeing how it's now storm season, what is the method you've had most success with in the case of a power outage? Well, last year I went ahead and I bought a bunch of big deep cycle marine batteries. I have 4 of them and they're run in succession. I always rethink this. One day I'm just going to get it tattooed to my arm so I never make this mistake. But all of them combined give me a very long duration of 12 volts. Okay, so if I said anything wrong, what matters is it's 12 volts. Okay, they're 12 volt batteries. They're on a trickle charger that keeps them topped off. And that charger just is actually turned off every single day for 15 minutes and turned on to analyze the batteries and add more if they need. And it takes them all the way up to like 14.7 volts. And that runs all of my Vortec pumps and my 2 Vector pumps through a whole series of wires that go to all of the individual drivers. And that's, you know, that series of batteries will actually keep all those pumps running at normal speed for 24 hours straight. Now, it will not keep the return pump going, so that would not help my reef tank keeping water in the sump going back up. It would only keep all the vortex going, and it would keep the water flowing from the return pump, which is a Vector pump, to the anemone cube, so that's good. But the water in the sump, all those things, you know, the reactors, the skimmer, all that would be turned off because it's power outage, because they're not on battery backup, because all those are AC driven items. So I own a big, huge generator. And fortunately, I've not had to use a generator in over a year. Last February, a year ago, was the big bad ice storm that wiped out all the power in Texas. And we were out of power for days, and I was running on generator power for days. And since that event, I've not had to need a generator at all, but I bought a brand new big one that runs on natural gas or propane or gasoline. And about 2 weeks ago, I think it was, maybe 3, I went ahead and I tested it finally after, you know, I bought it a year ago, but I hadn't even tested it. So I went ahead and I made sure that it operated correctly. I turned off the power to the entire fish room, and then I went ahead and I hooked up all my wires and got everything running. And I had everything operational, and I let it run like that for about 20-30 minutes. It was a successful test. I then disconnected everything, put it all away, and turned the power back onto the fish room, and everything's back to normal. So I have a generator I rely upon. And what the generator does, it turns on every outlet in my fish room. And that way, no matter what is plugged in, I don't have to go sit there and move cords. I just have one main line that goes to the generator that will feed my emergency fish room source. And the benefit of having extra outlets in the fish room that have nothing plugged into them is I can run an extension cord from the fish room to the living room, to the router and the television and you know, the Apple TV. And I can even run, with this new generator, which is a 50 amp generator, I can even run an extension cord straight to the fridge and keep all the food nice and cool so it won't start going bad or have the fridge, the freezer melt. So that has been my solution for a long time. Now, I'm sure everyone thinks, well, why don't you just have a whole house generator? Number one, the cost. Normally, I think they're around $8,000 or more. And the other problem is my neighborhood has no natural gas hooked up to the houses. Now, I did find out, I think a year ago, maybe a year and a half ago, these guys were working on the street yet again, and they had marked all these things on our lawns. And there was a flag that said natural gas. And I was like, are you kidding me? I've lived in this house 20 years, and you're telling me I have natural gas under my lawn? I want it. So I think it would probably cost me another $1,500 or so to make the city give me some natural gas. And if I had natural gas, I could run it to a whole house generator. So now I'm looking at $10,000 or so to have something come on automatically. And I do like that. I just don't want to pay for that. So I use a regular generator that you can just pull out and hook everything up. And then when you're done, you put it all away. And I've been doing that as needed, 2-3 times a year for the last 15 years or so, 17 years. Like I said, for the last 12, 14 months, I haven't needed to use it once. I actually did a test just because I hadn't done it so long. And you're actually supposed to start your generator, if you own one, every single month for 2 reasons. Number 1, make sure it works. And number 2, to make sure that the gas isn't fouling and gumming up the gas line that goes down to the carburetor. Now, one nice thing about my nice new generator is that it has a big old battery on the side, and so it's a push start. So I don't even have to even yank on the rope like a lawnmower, which is really, really nice. And I was really impressed that after a year of just sitting there, assembled, all I did was put the wheels on it and the handle on it and put the oil in the crankcase, but I didn't put a drop of gas in it. And I thought, oh, it's been sitting there all this time. I'm sure that battery is dead, even though it had never been run. And when I did my test, I pushed it and it worked. Like, wow. So by running it for that 25 minutes, it actually recharged its battery too. So that way it's ready for the next time I have to start it. So having that quick start is really nice on there, but it does require someone to be here at the house that can actually pull it out of the shed, hook up the wire, the big feed, and turn it on. And in the middle of a storm, no one wants to do that. You just want to be in your house with your candles and your blanket and your dog. That's what I want to do. But you get wet, you deal with it, and you get power to your tank, and your livestock lives, and it's a good story. Dave says, do you ever change out your calcium reactor effluent tubing? It gets dirty. No, I clean it. So I have some super old tubing brushes. It's like a wire with a brush on the end. And I have some that are very narrow diameter all the way up to some very large diameter ones for all different size tubing. Now, I wouldn't have anything for this size. This is just too large. But for that 1/4-inch tubing that's coming out, I actually have a brush that fits in there, and I will work my way into the effluent tubing, and then I will disconnect it from the fitting, and I'll do the other end so the tubing is nice and clear. And that has been my method. If your effluent tubing is getting dirty with algae, then you have light shining on it. You should find some way to trap the lighting from your refugium, like put some kind of... I like to use this black foam. It's kind of like almost like a sponge material. You can cut it with scissors, and you find it at hobby shops, and you can just create some kind of a lampshade around your refugium light to keep the light in the refugium and off of all your reactors and your skimmer, so everything stays clean. And that way you don't have all this extra cleaning to do. Digging with Cruzy says, what's your preference on nitrate test kit? I've been using API forever because it measures a nice high number when my numbers were high. Now that my numbers are lower, I can use something like Elos, or I'm kind of curious to try out the nitrate one from Hannah, the Hannah checker. But every time I've looked into it, I considered it, I would see people saying I can't find the reagents anywhere. So that dissuades me from wanting to buy the checker if I can't buy the reagents. So I've just been using the Hannah checker. I mean, the API test kit. Those test kits are cheap. They're like $10, maybe $14. And yellow is good and red is bad. It's pretty simple. So if I have anything close to yellow, I'm usually in the right range. If I'm deep into the reds, then I'm obviously horribly bad. Fortunately, I've not been horribly bad for a long time now, for the last 6 or 7 months. And it's just a slight, it's kind of a little orange hue to it, which is in the 15 to 20 range. And that's close enough. It's good enough for me. I don't need to know the exact absolute number. And when I see people post things like, my nitrate is 0.7 or it's 7.14, I'm like, so it's 7. I don't know. That seems so specific, where we just want to generally have something under 10 would be nice. In my tank, I run my numbers a little bit higher. My stuff's really old. It's used to higher numbers, so I'm not going to strip it down to almost nothing. I'm just going to kind of keep it reasonable. Sid says, I base my water changes off boxes of salt. If I want to do 1 box a month or 2 boxes a month, etc., unless I have a reason, I need to do more. Okay. I feel like there's more of a reason why to do the water change at all. And keep in mind, there are people out there that do no water changes at all. I tend to do them sporadically, a few a year. I'm thinking to do better, but here it is. I did 1 in January. I'm finally doing 1 in April. I'm already behind the curve, right? But if I was to do one every so often, I think maybe I'll see my corals pick up a little bit more momentum in the growth department, because like I said, they seem to be kind of, I don't know. They're definitely colorful and they definitely are branching, but they're not shooting for the sky. They seem to be kind of slowly growing and or kind of sitting there, and I'm not too happy about that. Hernando, it's about time you become a member. Where have you been? Sean suggests the white woodwork is a good idea. Hey, Scott, I'm glad you're back to work, and I'm glad you're feeling better after brain surgery years ago. So keep up the good work. Jaws Reef says pyramid snails are a real issue with clams. I've had issues with them before. You know, pyramid snails do definitely harm clams, but they're visible, and you can literally knock them off with toothpicks or some kind of other, like the shish kebab skewers. You can just flick them off into a bowl. They're not that hard to see, so you can take the clam out of the tank possibly, knock them off the shell, and put them right back in the tank again before they even notice. But this was some kind of a disease that was happening. It was, I can't remember what kind of plague it was specifically, but it was bad. Chris says, I put clean water in my dog's bowl and he drinks out of the toilet. You need to clean your toilet frequently, Chris. Daniel says, my tank's been set up for 4 months, but my sump is so dirty. How do you guys clean up the sump? Do I have to get everything out? Okay, so that's a great question. I like to clean the sump every so often. And when I do that, I'm literally going into each zone of the sump. You know, my sump is really big. So I have a skimmer section, I have a return zone. I usually pick an area, and I have a large refugium here in the front, right behind my feet here. And so, like today, I will clean the front of the refugium, and I have a scraper, and I will clean the acrylic panel so it looks nice. And then if I am motivated, I will go through and I will vacuum all the waste that is around the substrate, which has been kind of building up over the last 6 or 8 months. And I have an attachment, and I sell them in my shop from VCA. It's a vacuum attachment that will fit onto a MaxiJet pump or onto a C-Che pump, and you can use that attachment. So you've got your plastic 3D printed thing on the power head, and then you run tubing into something, a bucket nearby, a filter sock in your sump, and you can just vacuum away, and it just moves the water back into, like if you're doing the sock inside your sump, it is just recirculating the water, so you don't lose any water while you're working, but you're pulling out a lot of sediment. And so I will do that. And then another day, I might actually take the protein skimmer out completely to where I can wipe down all the walls, scrape them clean of any kind of anything. It could be sponge, it could be vermitid snails, it could be spirorbid worms, it could be stray anemones that sneak around in my sump. I mean, you name it. There's all kinds of stuff down there from time to time. Scrape them all off, and again, vacuum the bottom to get everything I can get off of there, get all the detritus out, put my skimmer stand back in place, put my protein skimmer back in place, and that section's done. And then finally, it's the return zone. The return zone usually just has a little bit of stuff here and there, and I can vacuum it, and I like to wipe it down with a sponge. And if there's anything that's gotten a little bit more stubborn, I take a credit card and I scrape that, because credit cards are made of plastic, and so they won't do any damage. So like when I was at the MACNA event last weekend, I got 2 key cards for my hotel room. Now, I don't know what's inside these things, but somehow they open doors, so there must be something, some kind of magnetic strip or whatever, but I don't care. I hold it in my hand and I scrape the glass, and it makes my tank clean. And when they get dull, and I've got 4 edges to work with, when it's completely done, I throw it away, and I grab a new gift card or hotel key card. So I always have a stack of those in my possession. They're very handy for the, you know, you use them with your hand. So they're very handy, and they will not damage your tank or your sump. And so then that way they're very practical. You can also take your hand and hold it, and you can go between the sand and the glass and clean this area where all this garbage stuff happens. So that way the sand looks nice and clean again, like the day you set up your tank. Sid says he'll build my deck. That is awesome. Thank you, Sid. You know, I'm thinking if it's as expensive as I think this I'd like to use that composite lumber, that fake stuff that's supposed to last forever. And if I end up getting that, it may be super expensive too. I don't know. I have paid so much in the last year for what the house needed that I'm kind of fed up. And I'm thinking I might build this stupid deck myself, no matter how long it takes, and just, sink my posts where I need them and work my way out a piece at a time until I finally complete the project. Just a thought. I don't know. But I was very happy to hire the sheetrockers to get that building done because they were going to do it in about 3 days flat. And be ready for paint. And I can just go ahead and move in there and paint it and hook up all my outlets and my switches and put up some shelves and build my workstations and then start filling it up with goodies. LS10 Works says, have you ever come away from the hobby and back into it? I recently, 6 months ago, got back in after a 2-year break from reefing. Nope. When I get into a hobby, I'm doing it for life. And it doesn't make it much of a hobby, does it? But no, I'm kind of like that. It's like a TV show. I have to watch every single episode till the show ends and they take away any more storylines. And I'm like, they canceled it. And so I'm in for the long haul. And, plus, what do I do with all my creatures? They're relying on me to keep them alive. I can't just suddenly say, I need a break from y'all. I'd have to keep taking care of them because they're my pets. And, I've had some corals for a super long time. I've had some fish for a very long time. So I've never taken a break. Some people do. And I find that sometimes people need to take a break, and it's good for them. There could be a variety of reasons why. Maybe they're moving, or their income has changed, or their relationship demanded it. And then later on, they decide to re-enter, and they've got a lot more motivation and inspiration, and they create something much nicer than the first time. In my situation, it's never been a take a break from it. It's been more like prepare for the next big tank. And like this one here behind me, before the 400 gallon, I had a 280 in generally the same spot with a smaller room behind it. And when that tank leaked, I had to break it down. And I put everything in feeding troughs, these big Rubbermaid troughs to keep them alive. I spent 7 months building that room behind me to get it ready for a 400 gallon dream tank. And boy, I did that in 2010. And here we are, 2022. So I did it 12 years ago. And I don't want to go bigger. And everyone keeps saying, well, aren't you going to have tanks in your new building? I'm like, I don't want tanks in my new building. I want my building to be for work. And I want to come home and enjoy my reef. That's what I want. And I just, my thoughts do permeate my mind saying maybe put something small in there, something pretty, but that building is not going to have battery backup. It's not going to have a generator running it. If the power's out, I'm not going to be working. I'll take a little break. I'll take off an afternoon, And I don't want to have a tank in there that I'm worried, oh no, now I got to keep that one alive too when I got to worry about this one right here behind me. So I don't really want to add another complication to my life. But that being said, I do possibly see, once this house is nice and finished, setting up a new tank somewhere in this house, some different spot, maybe the living room, maybe the bedroom, I don't know. That could be another tank that's just very different from what I'm doing now. And I think that would be a really nice thing to do. But I'm not going to do it now when I'm about to replace carpet and paint walls. So everything has to happen at the right time. Alex says, what do you think about the AI Hydra 64 lights? Nothing negative. They've been around for a while. I mean, the AI line has been around for a long time. I remember when they had, I think they started with the 32s, or maybe the 16s, and then the 32s, it's now 64s. I'm sure that the more modern ones have better control. I just saw an announcement from Ecotech saying that AI and Mobius are combining, so that will allow you to have one software that'll let you control either product line, which would be nice. And I would think that the newer Hydra lights should do some pretty nice features compared to the original ones from so long ago. Reef With Me says, are you going to be traveling? Are there any weather issues? Nope, I'm here. Thank you. I know what you're doing. Appreciate that. I'm here. I'll be watching these guys do some sheetrock work. We're going to have some rain on Monday and Tuesday. That's about it. Other than that, good to go. Skinner says the nudibranch that he bought is white with black stripes. Oh, you should post that in Club Mueller's Reef. I'd love to see it. I'd love to see it eating some algae, too. That'd be really cool. There are certain nudibranchs that we can keep in our aquariums that will do well. The lettuce nudibranch is more green, and there's a really pretty picture of it on my Creature ID section of my website if you want to check it out. And it specifically is designed or is known for eating Bryopsis, which is a very coarse turf algae. Hen Roth says, is there anything on the market that's proven to keep SPS, LPS color and health? I think I understand what you're saying. How do we keep our corals healthy and colorful? Well, husbandry is the first step. The adequate amount of light, but not too much light. Good water quality, good water parameters, good temperature, the proper salinity. Certain foods are better than others. I mean, it's kind of, that's the whole point of this whole channel. There are different things people use. There's different methods people follow. Triton is a method that some people employ that never does a water change. And you send in an ICP test, I believe, every single month. And based on those results, they tell you to add part 1, 2, 3, or 4, A, B, C, D. They will tell you how much of each one. And then you do the next test in a month, and they tell you nothing of A and B, but you need a little bit of C. And then you do the next test, and you need way more of D and a little bit of A. And they just live that lifestyle. And then there's Aquaforce. They have a whole product line too. And then there's Andre's Moonshiner situation where you have all these bottles of different things that have witch hazel and things, and you cook up this crazy laboratory situation to get a certain effect. And that's become rather popular. And then there's just old school stuff where you just do water changes and you run a protein skimmer and you keep your tank clean and you have good flow and good lighting. So, but there are certain things that give you more coral health, and there, as your water parameters get away from you, the coral health goes down. When things get out of range, the colorations fade. So we want to make sure that we are keeping everything in check and following the basic guidelines when it comes to water parameters, and then good flow and good lighting. And that's the proven method. Reefing Manny says, speaking of Bryopsis, have you ever tried Fluconazole in your tank to get rid of it? If so, what were the results? I did not, because I have not had Bryopsis in 15 years. It came in on a rock that someone gave me because he wanted me to hold his corals as he was moving to another state. And so he said, hey, I've got this huge rock. We're going to put it in your tank. We'll put all my corals on it. And so I put it in my tank, and it was fine. And then suddenly I had this green algae growing off of it. I said, what is this stuff? And he says, oh, it's Bryopsis. I'm like, okay. And how do you get rid of it? He goes, well, it's really hard to get rid of. I had a fox face in my tank. It just eats it. And I was like, well, I don't have a fox face, and I don't want a fox face. And he's like, I'm sorry. So I tried different methods to get rid of it, including the lettuce nudibranch. So fox face could help. But no, I did not have that. Fluconazole wasn't a product at that time when I had Bryopsis. And so I don't have any opinion on that one. I can't give you any advice. Will it work? Don't know. I know it works with Derbacia, which is the green hair algae. I know it works with Valonia, which is bubble algae, if you use it at triple strength. But I cannot say if it'll work with Bryopsis. I don't know. It might, but I don't know. Burnt Squirrel One says, have you ever tried Ozone on your tank? I have not. I've never used Ozone. I've never had the desire to do it. The positive would be better clarity of water. Negative is you could overdose and inhale the ozone and be sick to your stomach. So I've not had the need. So I can't. And you need a protein skimmer that is made of the right material, because you have to inject the ozone into the body of the protein skimmer. And if it's cheap plastic and not cast acrylic, it will break down and crack the protein skimmer. The ozone will just destroy it. And you have to use carbon on the output of the vent of the protein skimmer so the ozone doesn't get into the room. You'll smell ozone. Just like your name is Burnt Squirrel, you'll smell burnt ozone, and we don't want to do that. Gavrad says, the guy at the LFS told me that 7.8 pH is good and normal. He stated I won't notice coral growth different between 8.1 and 8.3. What are your thoughts? The general goal would be the peak of the day we want to be at 8.3. So 7.8 is pretty low. And but there are people that have kept reef tanks successfully between 7.8 and 8.0 every single day. There are others that do well with a tank that's 8.1 to 8.3. There's some that have 8.0 to 8.2. But we want to be a little bit up there on the pH scale. I recently changed out my probe, even though my last one was working fine, and I was always measuring my peak of the day at 8.3. And my new one is saying that I'm 7.8 to 8.0, which I'm kind of having a hard time believing. Now, fortunately, I have another pH probe in the frag tank, and I think I'm just going to take some tank water out of the reef and put that probe in there and just see what the apex says that one reads, because I'm curious if my tank has suddenly dropped, or if it's the probe I'm using is giving me a faulty number because I calibrated it, but I have calibrated the previous probe that held calibration perfectly and gave me better numbers. So I don't know. Maybe that's why my corals aren't growing. I'll have to find out. Extra Cargo says, what putty do you recommend for mounting corals in the tank? Everything I find at the hardware store says stay soft in the tank. I like something called DD Aquascape Putty, and I sell it, and it's I have some in my inventory. It's here in the shop, and I like it because it's coralline color. It's purple. So when you use it in your tank, it's not a big piece of white concrete on your coralline covered rock. And I like it a lot. It works really well in the tank. I've been using the same stuff for years, and I really don't like anything else except the stuff from DD Aquascape. I have a product review about it on my website as well. Eli says a friend's urchin was doing really badly, and he was hand feeding it every day. What did he feed it? Pellet food? Nori? I'm curious. And now you have two pin cushions that are doing really great. You're very welcome, Extra Cargo. He says thanks for the auto stirrer, and the kids and he are enjoying the Coral Magazine issues. I was just reading Coral Magazine today. I highly recommend it. Hernando says, filter socks or no filter socks? Knowing the size of your tanks, I'm going to assume you have to use filter socks. For me, I only use them as needed 3 or 4 times a year. I prefer not to have filter socks in my system at all because I hate cleaning them. Michael says, what grit sandpaper do you use for smoothing out acrylic, the acrylic that I just cut? So when I glue 2 pieces together and I have a corner that's going to have another piece on top, I sand that area. And I use 220. And if for some reason the 2 pieces are a little bit uneven and it's going to take forever to do this at 220, I'll use 120 first, and then I switch to 220 to get a nice smooth connection. I think the last time I was on, I showed you guys a really tall dosing container. Well, how would you like to see a really big top-off container? So, this one is for a customer. They've been waiting very patiently. They're actually getting impatient. This one right here, I think is 35 inches tall. 34 tall, 24 wide, 7 deep, and it holds 22 gallons of water. So you can't really see it, but here on the top, this is where the lid is going to be. You'll put the pump in there. You'll run the tubing out here to go into the sump, and the power cord is right here. But inside, the thing you can't see is that I put a baffle in the middle of this wall right here. Because it's so narrow, and I did not want the walls, I have to hold this up with one leg. I didn't want the walls to bulge out from the water pressure, so I put in a baffle on the inside that's not, it's only about this big. So there's, it's all water. So I don't have a compartment, and it's just a divider that holds the center together so it stays nice and sturdy. And once I peel off the paper and route off the top and bottom so it's nice and clean, I will post a picture on Instagram where you guys can check it out. But I'll tell you this, when I had to cut that out and I drew it in V-carve, which is what my CNC uses, I was like, oh my God, this thing is huge. And I'm the one that quoted it. But I did not remember it being so big. I mean, this is crazy. This is taller than bar stool height. I can almost sit on this darn thing. I could sit on it, but it'd be uncomfortable. So anyway, that's something I made that's going out on Monday. That'll make that customer very happy to receive. Thank you, Raul. He says, Mark, your batteries are connected in parallel, and that's what keeps them the same volts, but increases the amp hour capacity. Thank you. I don't know why it's so hard for me to remember that kind of stuff. Jaws Reef says, what's the best suggestion for turf algae? Manual removal and keeping nutrients in check. Maybe an urchin. Only thing I can think of that could make an impact. Yeah. Hermit crabs, also very good at working on turf algae. The tuxedo urchins are really good choices to work on it. My rock work, I know everything's purple for you guys. Maybe I should just change the color. You've been looking at this purple tank too long. Let's make it hideous white. That's a real flavor. Here we go. So now it's more daylight looking. And I think even now in this video, you can see all the top of my rock was really crazy red for a long time. And I attributed that red, basically turf algae, to being the result of dosing all that potassium that was missing. It created this red blanket. It looked like cyano, did not come off, could not scrape it off. But the urchins have been just eating, and they're just cleaning all the rock surface, and all that red stuff's going away. And the rock is starting to look like rock again instead of this weird cyano tank. There's one of my urchins right there. He's covered with about 19 shells, so I can't possibly give him the crown. There's another one right there. There was one behind the copper band. It has since moved since I started the stream, because that's why I had this here so you could see it. But let's see, will this work for you guys? I have to move it way over here. But if you look at the rock, you can see the rock work is not red anymore. It's really nice. Oh, good. Casual Reef Keeping says the Hanna high-range nitrate reagents are available again pretty well. That's good. Chris Cook says, great channel and saw you at Macna last weekend. Thanks for all you do. You're welcome. I can't help it. Andy Parsons says, why does the US have so many power outages? Where I live in the UK, the last power outage was like 15 years ago. I've wondered about this for many years, but never asked anyone. I don't know. Sometimes it's just a crazy accident. Like, for example, I've seen all kinds of crazy things over the years. I've watched a transformer that's up on the pole just ignite with fire. And then all these fire department and emergency responders showed up and stood around and did nothing. And then finally, somebody from the electric company showed up and dealt with it. But they just made sure that the fire didn't spread into the trees and the bushes. And so that knocked out power. There are times where there's a storm, it knocks out power. There's times where a car just hits a pole and knocks out power to one part of the city. That's happened before. We had a really bad, humongous ice storm here a year ago, February, that knocked out power for 20 million people for an entire week. And the infrastructure was not prepared for that ice storm whatsoever. And apparently, some of the substations or I don't know I only know what they say, and even then I doubt half of what I'm reading. But apparently some things were down for maintenance, which why would you be maintaining anything when you know a massive cold front is coming? They've been warning people, here it comes, and then they don't have the electric company running at 100%. That's crazy to me. And my brain says what's happened. You know, the reality is you've got some plants that are being shut down for maintenance. Don't know why. Let's just say something's broken. And the part they need to fix it is on a container ship coming from China or somewhere, right? And it's in the middle of the ocean, and it'll be here in 3 more weeks. Well, if there's a big, bad cold front coming in, and that facility is down and can't operate to provide power when you know everyone's going to be demanding it, then you're going to have to pay top dollar for that part to get that thing operational now. I mean, my friend, she runs a scuba shop. Her scuba shop makes money. And the thing a scuba diver needs is a tank full of air on their back. And the compressor that fills the tanks, they have to fill up 80 tanks at a time. So that way when people come to rent tanks to go diving, they have air. And when her compressor goes down, she has no air for her divers, and the divers can't dive. So I told her one day, I said, you know, I know your compressor's broken and it keeps breaking. Why don't you just take all that money you're making and just get a top dollar machine from wherever and have them literally bring it in with a helicopter like the military does and just drop it on top of your building so you've got, you know, a solution. And, you know, she said, that's not a bad question, because honestly, I am sick of this, because when she's in Hawaii, and so when the compressor goes down, the guy that works on it is on a different island entirely, and the parts come from the mainland, and so there's a whole delay. And I just said, I just feel like if it costs you $50,000 or $70,000, and you can get a brand new one that's delivered to you overnight and parked right next to your building, so when you show up, there's a crate with a big rope that went up to the sky, you know, the helicopter. I mean, that's my, you know, Tom Clancy type mentality, that if it costs you a fortune but you stay in business, sometimes you just have to do it. And it will pay for itself over time, because she just keeps renting and renting and renting and renting. And she didn't have to do that. She did end up getting, you know, some good work done to get it resolved once and for all. But there are times where you just have to spend more to get it going. And I just had this feeling that some of these plants were closed down because we're waiting for some stupid cheap part, when we could just pay top dollar for the right part to get it operational so that everyone has power. Now, that's me not knowing anything about the electrical industry and not knowing how all these things work, but I just kind of know how unions work and how, you know, contracts work. And I just had this feeling that's what was going on. So, you know, when winter came this year, everyone was like holding their breath and saying, you know, what is the power company going to do this year? And the one thing they did, they used a lot of social media to tell everyone, all the power plants are running at peak efficiency. I'm like, should have been doing that a year ago when you killed countless aquariums and God knows what. You know, it affected so many people. So good. Sometimes we learn from bad, but why does it happen so frequently? I don't know. California has a lot of people there, and they have something called brownouts, and they have this thing where they stagger the power for different times of day, and the whole thing sounds insane. I just say put up a few more nuclear plants and just provide the power. Because, and here's my bottom line, we have to pay for the electricity we get. And if I use 2,000 kilowatts and have to pay $300 in electricity, and then next month I use 4,000 kilowatts and I have to pay $600 in electricity, they make more money. Why would they ever say don't use so much power? So they want to make money. They're in the business of making money. So the more that we all use, the more rich they get. So why would you not keep building more and more plants and provide tons of power, and we just keep paying the bill? That just seems the logical outcome. That is, I don't know if that's the definition of capitalism, but to me, it makes no sense when, like, don't use so much power because there's not enough for everyone. It's like, what are you talking about? It comes down to infrastructure. It comes down to equipment. It comes down to maintenance, just like it does with my aquarium. This little guy here needs a bunch of stuff I have to do, and I have to stay on top of it. And if I have to pay top dollar for a pump overnight to get the tank running again, rather than waiting for it to show up, you know, at the fish store in 2 weeks, I might pay top dollar that time. All right. David says, I was told to run my salinity at 1.025 today, but I'm already locked in at 1.026. Should I keep it? Also, what starting cycle would you suggest? Okay, so 1.026 is fine. That's where I keep my tank all the time. I see no reason to be at 2.5 or 2.4. And, you know, we're talking about semantics here. That is so close to almost the exact same thing. It's fine. If they said keep it at 1.017 and you're at 1.026, that's a whole different discussion. But you're not. You're keeping a reef tank. Having a tank at 1.026 is great. If it bumps up to 1.027, 1.028, you might watch some zoanthids close up. But as soon as you get some top-off water in the tank and the salinity comes back down to 1.026, they'll open up again and be happy. So don't worry about 1.025 versus 1.026. And then what starting cycle? You have lots of choices. The method I've used for many years is just take a piece of shrimp from the deli, from the supermarket. I just throw the whole carcass, not just the tail, the whole animal. I just throw it in the tank and let it rot for 3 days. Now, if you have a big tank, like a 400-gallon, you might need 3 or 4 shrimp. If you're doing a 60-gallon tank, 1 shrimp. If you're doing a nano, 1 shrimp might be too much because it's, you know, 12 gallons of water. But we want to have a shrimp rot for 3 days. That will release ammonia in the water. This thing will look disgusting. You just remove it and throw it away, and now your tank cycle has started. If you don't want to do that, there are products you can buy that have ammonia in them. Brightwell has a product which I sell from my shop called the Dry Rock Starter Kit, and it literally will do the cycle and populate bacteria onto the rock and complete the cycle in 8 days. And I have like 6 or 8 of those kits in stock because so many of you are running tanks with dry rock, and I figured, oh my God, someone came out with a product to cycle a dry rock tank. This is fantastic. And so I carry those for people that need it. Lincoln Town says, is a quality fuge light a must-have? If you're going to grow a refugium full of plants, yes. And you say quality, we could be debating, well, I got this bulb at Home Depot for $10 versus Ecotech wants $200 for theirs, or AI wants $120 for theirs. Yeah, you have to decide what is good for you, what works best in your situation. There are freshwater lights. There are lights that lean into the pink coloration that I personally don't like to use. I prefer aiming for 5100 Kelvin to 6500 Kelvin, which is daylight. And the light that I have over my refugium down here below me is white light. It's a mixture of 5100 and 6500 Kelvin LED chips. And it runs about 9 hours a day and makes my macroalgae continue to grow perfectly well. You can spend a lot, you can spend a little. The trick is you want to grow the algae and you don't want the light to spill out everywhere else and grow algae inside your equipment. Marcus is asking me, how is the pasta? Yep, all is well. Sage of Light says, I started with tap water and I'm getting my RODI set up soon. Would you just keep doing 10% weekly water changes to transition, or a large-scale water change? I'd do a bigger water change. I don't know what size your tank is, but I would probably do like 25% each week. In 4 weeks, in theory, you'd basically change 100% of the water. We know that's not exactly true because there's a dilution factor going on there, but you can definitely change out quite a bit and get rid of that tap out of the system, because tap has who knows what in it, including fluoride and chloramine and chlorine. It may have some metals in it too, sediments, all kinds of stuff. So, yep, congrats on the RODI. You did say you started with tap water. You didn't say how old the tank is. I mean, maybe you just started a cycle with tap water. Maybe you just filled it up with tap, not knowing better. And now you're ready to start being a saltwater enthusiast. I have no idea. Or maybe you've been running tap for 2 years and now you finally said, okay, I'll try RODI. See, I don't know enough information to really give you a solid answer, but those are some of my replies. Jake says, are you still loving your skies, and can you share your lighting schedule? My lighting schedule is shared. I think you go into the profiles on Apex Fusion and look for Milev's Reef or Milev, and you'll find me in there, and you can try it out. Now, my schedule is my schedule. I don't think it shares my profiles. In my profiles, I have 5 different ones that are specifically set to where I can just literally pick. Like right now, I'm running a streaming profile behind me. Here, let me change this because I'm tired of being out of focus. There we go. See, now it looks like me again. Andrea's on top of it. She is sharing links to all the things. Thank you for doing that. Lincoln says, is there a difference between plastic and fabric filter socks? The plastic ones are mesh. They're usually easier to clean. They don't clog up as quickly compared to the fleece or felt filter socks we so often buy. So if you're kind of sick of socks that don't clean, you could try to use the mesh ones. They also come in different micron levels as well, and you can kind of pick and choose. But a 200 micron mesh bag will still do a nice job of trapping a lot of waste. But you still have to take them out every 3 days and clean them out, because we don't want the waste in the sock to sit there in the system 24 hours a day until you finally get around to it. And we definitely don't want to wait for the sock to be overflowing before we change it. Tim says, do you think Ecotech will ever put out any Versa pumps for sale? It's got to be the worst product launch I've seen. Yes, I do. When? I don't know. I could swear someone said BRS put up some Versas like 2 weeks ago, and of course 10 minutes later they were sold out. And I was like, man, because I've been on back order as a seller for like 2 years waiting for my shipment to come in. So I don't know when they're going to do it, but I'm sure they would love to sell more of those pumps. It's just COVID really affected everything. And I mean, this is me speaking, Mark Levinson, hobbyist. I believe there is so little profit margin in making a Versa pump that they'd rather sell a Radeon Light or a Vectra pump, which makes more money, than they would to sell, 50 Versa pumps that make them $10 each or whatever, It's just a matter of paying for all the employees in the building, OS says, I have a lot of hard corals and they're turning white. What could be the problem? OS, we need a lot of information, but if the tips are turning white, that could be new growth. If the base is turning white, it could be alkalinity. If the whole thing's turning white, it could be bleached, or it could be dead. I mean, it's so hard to answer. That's a very vague question. And all I can say is come into Club Milev's Reef on Facebook, and we will do what we can to help you. So it's facebook.com/groups/Milev's Reef. And you can post pictures. You can tell us about your water parameters. You can show us your tank, tell us the age, tell us what you do, what kind of lights you're running, how long you're running them. I mean, all the details. And we will have a whole bunch of people there to help you figure out what's going on. Tim says, I bought the Comore continuous duty stepper motor, but the darn thing would not link up with the net or Bluetooth or whatever. Some kind of glitch. I got so mad I gave up and sent it back. I did set one of those up for a friend because I wasn't sure how it was going to work compared to the original ones. Because the original Comore, that was Bluetooth. And then they came out with like a Wi-Fi model. And then they came out with a continuous duty. And I wanted to try it out. I wanted to see what it would do. I wanted to see if it was loud. I wanted to see if it was going to click and irritate me. And so I set up with my Wi-Fi, and then I used it for 2 days, just moving water in a vase, just to see it operate. I want to see if it felt warm to the touch, and if it kept calibration. And then I just put it, back in the box. And then a friend of mine said, I need that exact pump. I was like, dude, would you take the one I opened and played with briefly? And he said, that'd be great. And so I sent it to him, and he said, I can't get the Wi-Fi to connect, whatever, but it's running because it's just set to whatever you set it to. And I was like, I wish I could help you, but I mean, I kind of went through the 20 minutes of frustration until I finally figured it out. And then once I got it going, I was like, okay, we're good to go. But I didn't memorize it because I didn't think I'd need to memorize it. I thought it was just me having a hard time setting it up. some of this stuff is just not as intuitive as we'd like it to be. And, you know, I was talking with Jason from Siche. I have a pump running right now to keep my anemones and clownfish content while they wait for their new home. And yet I can't seem to get past something in the beginning. There's like a little padlock on there all the time, and it won't connect to my Wi-Fi. And there's something about a password in an app. And he told me, all you gotta do is this, this, and this. And I'm like, ugh, I just want to plug it in and use it. I don't want to sit there and fight it, you know? And that's where, you know, we have apps for everything. And you know, we have Wi-Fi to drive things, and it's supposed to make your life easier. But sometimes just having something you plug in the wall and turn a switch is just really convenient. I know it makes me sound like an old guy, but I too feel your pain when you're trying to figure out something and just will not connect. And I am the one that will call Ecotech and say, walk me through this. And they'll just like, oh, I did it. It's done. You're good. If there's anything else, just call us back. I'm like, don't you want to teach me? He goes, it's already done. I'm like, all right, thank you. Bye. And I hang up. Tim says, I saw some people discussing acropore eating flatworms, and they did some experiments and concluded that peppermint shrimp will eat the eggs. That's interesting. I know that the camelback shrimp will eat them, for sure. But I hadn't heard that about peppermint shrimp. So that'd be nice. Paul says, what would you suggest to a newer reefer who's trying to feed their cleanup crew in a newer system where it looks like the cleanup crew has need for more algae to stay fed? Okay, so basically you're saying the tank is too clean and there's a cleanup crew in there and it's going to starve to death because there's nothing to snack on. You could definitely put in some pellet food that sinks to the bottom and they will scavenge and find it. You can do that. That's why I did a video on here that's called the Reef Timeline. It's such an important video because it tells you when each thing should be added to the tank and why. And that way you don't put things in too soon or you don't turn things on too early. For example, just because you set up a brand new tank doesn't mean the refugium should be running. Or people say, I hooked up the protein skimmer, but it won't work, so it needs to break in for a few weeks. And I find that to be a huge myth. It's not true at all. I've never encountered that. Every protein skimmer I've ever taken out of the box and hooked up started skimming immediately. So my theory is that people put a brand new skimmer in a brand new system with nothing, double negative, right? And they turn it on and the bubbles don't look right and no waste is being caught. They might have taken out a little bit of sand initially and it never worked ever since. And it's because the tank is too new. You shouldn't be running a skimmer anyway. And people say, take the collection cup off and let it run for weeks, it'll break in. I'm like, doesn't need that. Doesn't need it. The only thing that a protein skimmer might have on it that makes it not work right out of the box might be a little something on the plastics that you could have rinsed off in the first place before you put it in the sump or hooked it up on the tank. So if you have a tank with livestock and fish waste and a few corals and coralline algae or hair algae, if any of that's happening in the tank, the skimmer will operate because there are docks. There is dissolved organic compounds that can be extracted. But in a pristine, brand new system, there's nothing to skim, so the skimmer doesn't seem to work. And over time, the tank becomes dirty and the skimmer starts working. So people say, you see, it was a break-in period. I'm like, no, it's finally time to run a skimmer. So when people start a tank, because I'm old school when it comes to starting a cycle, and I say start the cycle and wait 4 weeks. You know, I'm not there to get it done in 2 days or 4 days or 8 days like that Brightwell product. I'm not in a rush to cycle a tank. Just cycle it. And in 3 to 4 weeks, the tank is now cycled. Now we add our first fish. We may add a coral. And then we enjoy that for a couple of weeks and see how they do. And if they're doing well, we might get a second fish. Or we might pick up a couple more corals because we're coral nuts and we need more coral in that tank and we can't wait. Corals are okay. And then we do our water changes. And then we turn on our protein skimmer. And then after a few months, we turn on the refugium. And then after a few more months, we say, okay, I think I might need to add, I don't know, an algae turf scrubber. Or I want to use dosing pumps to dose my alkaline and calcium because I'm tired of pouring it in by hand. That makes total sense. But doing everything from the moment you start the tank, and you start the tank and you're dosing this and you're being proactive. I want to run phosphate RX because I don't want any phosphate to happen to my tank before there's even any phosphate present. See what I'm saying? Sometimes we're going ahead of things and it's causing problems. So if the cleanup crew is in the tank too early and there's not enough food, yes, you can feed it. You can put nori on a clip, put the clip down near the sand, the snails will find it, the hermit crabs will come over, they'll all get a snack and they're fine. And then as the tank gets more and more dirty, the cleanup crew will go off and do its stuff. That's the longest answer ever to the simplest question in the world. And I apologize. I do ramble, and I've been talking too long. We should, I'm trying to get near the end of this so I can wrap up, I promise. Michael says, any tips for getting anemones to split? How long did it take for your anemone tank when you were feeding shrimp initially? Oh, wow. I've had the same anemones now going all the way back to 2003 and 2009, two different, the roses and as well as the white tip, tan looking ones that have the purple feet. And the rose splits maybe once or twice a year. The tan ones never split. I mean, they split initially and they never split now because my water's so stable. I think the simplest way to trigger a split is big water changes that are completely bad parameter-wise. Because there was a guy down in Granbury, and he was growing rose anemones 100 at a time. They split and split and split, and he goes, man. And he was selling them, and he was putting his kid through college. I mean, literally, that's what he did. So I couldn't really fault him for that, but I had another friend in Pennsylvania, and his anemones were splitting all the time, and when I finally got him to lock in his parameters, that all stopped. And he has one or two big happy anemones. So when we cause chaos in the tank, it will cause a reaction where the anemone says, I better split because I'm probably going to die. And that sounds terrible, but I think that's kind of mentality of this creature. It's thinking, I think I need to split because something's wrong, and that way there's a chance part of me will live. That's kind of the thought process. Now, the trick that some people have used in the past was to go ahead and feed the anemone heavily for several days and then do this big water change, and boom, you'd see them splitting. The other method I've seen people do is they actually take it out of the tank and they take a knife and they cut the thing in half. And then they have to put that somewhere. And I would not put it back in the tank because unless it is a anemone tank only, the two halves are now raw, torn open and from the cut. And it wasn't a natural thing. It was, man-handled. And because of that, it can cause things to die. And this is a true story. We had a demonstration at one of our club's events, and the person said, I'm going to teach you all how to propagate anemones. And he was, he went through this whole spiel. And then he had a cutting board, and he had a scalpel, and he had rubber gloves on and eye protection. And he took the anemone out of the tank, he cut it in half, and he put the two halves back into the demonstration tank. And he said, these are going to be raffle prizes for the end of the day. So some kid, I think he wasn't even 20 yet, he had raffle tickets for the anemones, and he won both halves. Well, congratulations to him. He won 2 anemones. He could have had one. Now he has 2 halves. But the thing is, he brought them home and he put them in his tank, and everything in his tank died. And I thought, well, how did that happen? So I asked more questions. Well, he had a little nano system, like a 12-gallon tank. And he took these 2 serrated anemone halves and plunked them down in there, and they just polluted all the water and killed his entire reef. And I was just like, oh. I mean, seriously, the tank might have been fine with one healing anemone, but not both. And I'm not saying he did anything wrong. He didn't know, and I wasn't aware of what he was doing, or I would have said, hey, what size is your tank? Maybe you shouldn't take both halves, But that's one of those things. So there are lots and lots of threads of people trying to manually cut them in half. I've seen people try to cut carpet anemones in half. It did not go well. There's been different attempts over the years, and basically a natural split is always going to be better than a man-made one, unless you have a propagation system to where you can put those things in and all the rest of your reef is totally safe. So we want to not hurt our livestock just because we're trying to have more. Now, you will get splits over time. They will happen on their own. If you're matching your alkalinity and your temperature and your salinity, your water change may not affect a split. But if the alkalinity is way off and you do a water change, the anemone might re-trigger to split. Tim, the camelback shrimp are not reef safe at all. But that was the thing from the Zeovit crowd. They had this article and they talked about how they had a separate small tank, like a 10-gallon tank, filled with camelback shrimp. And they would take their acro that was infested and they'd put it in that tank for something like exactly 20 minutes or 30 minutes. And that was enough for them to pick off and eat all the pests, take the coral out before they killed the coral. And then they take another coral and they'd put that in the tank. And they just did this each week. And they worked all their corals through the camelback shrimp in this separate system. But no, they are not reef safe at all. So if peppermint shrimp would help, that'd be nice. Julian says, what's the best way to lower nitrates? Well, it's a huge topic. I would say the simplest one is a 50% water change, because that'll cut your nitrates in half in one water change. And if you do 2 or 3 of those, you'll cut them in half, cut them in half, cut them in half. And you could be from 100 down to 25 in 4 water changes. No, 12 and a half in 4 water changes. Matthew says, is there a tutorial for Reef Trace? There's not yet, but Reef Trace is getting a huge update with a lot of changes. And when I was talking with the owner, I said, you know, we really need to put out some kind of a video that shows you all the different features and how you can use it. And he said, let's do it. So now there's a new version rolling out that will be coming out very soon. It's the perfect time to release a tutorial. So thanks for bringing that up. Tracy says, I'm having issues with Kato. It just died off. Parameters haven't changed. Why? Too much light could be possible. Not enough nutrients in the tank to feed it could be possible. The lights are running too long could be possible. Myself, I don't have much luck growing that. That is one I don't do well with, so that's why I keep growing feather caulerpa, because that one works for me. Jason says, I just finished my spring cleaning water change and all my tuxedo urchins are spawning. How are yours doing? Well, they look normal to me, so I'll do a water change and then we'll see if my urchins join in with your urchins. Mike says, I just got our first tank set up with a sump. I feel like a legit aquarist now. Welcome to the obsession. The battle is real. Alex says, aren't the Versa pumps still leaking and not available ever, it seems? No, they're not leaking. And I'm running one in my calcium reactor. I've been running it for the last couple of years. Tim says, are you dosing aminos and such? You spoke of trying. I'm running Acro Power. I'm putting in a small amount every single day with a single dosing pump. And I bought some of the AB Plus stuff from Red Sea that apparently is amino acids as well. I thought it was a green food, so I'm not really sure if I want to use both at the same time. But I'd like to squirt in the tank and see everything turn green. Emmanuel just got here as I feel the stream is ending. But we're not quite done yet. So they said, I'm about to transfer my SPS plugs from quarantine to the main tank. The PAR in the quarantine is 250, where the PAR in the display tank is 350. How should I go with the transfer on the rocks? The main parameters are very close, so I'm not concerned. Your light may have an acclimation period to where you can ramp it down and then have it build up over the next 14 to 28 days. That would be convenient. Otherwise, you can actually turn your lighting down a little bit to match what the corals were doing and then just gradually increase it, 5 or 10% each week until you get back up to that PAR 350. If you can't do that, I like to put brand new corals down low on the sand bed and then after a few weeks raise them up to their spot on the rock work. Those are the different approaches I can think of that might work. Killa Jam says, what are some tips for creating a more natural looking reef? Number 1, no frag rack in your tank. That is the number 1 issue. I can't stand seeing frag racks in tanks. It drives me crazy. It's the most unnatural thing to have something magnetically or suction cupped to the glass with little plugs sitting there. It makes no sense. It's a reef tank. Make it look like a reef tank. Also, your rockwork should not look like bricks. In other words, a brick has a pattern, and it's very level, and it's very concise. That also does not look natural to me. Now, everything you do when it comes to aquascape will look a little weird at first, but it will mature and look better. And as the corals grow in and hide it all, it won't even matter anymore at that point because you won't see it. But initially, we definitely want to try to create an aesthetic that looks nice. The rule of thirds should come into play. You may have a large structure in one spot and then a small one down to the side with some space in between them where there's just sand for fish to swim through and critters to crawl across. That could be nice. We don't want everything to be the exact same height. You know, I like to have some variation. Even my reef tank here, let me turn off the this little distracting piece of art. So in my tank here, I've got rock way up high, and it comes all the way down, and then it rises up, and then it comes down, and it does a little bommy here, and the corals are on top of the bommy. So I've created some variation to have it look more natural. And fortunately, when people come over, they say, man, your tank just looks so natural. And I appreciate hearing that because I really do like to make it look like it would be what you'd see in the ocean. But if you have, there's all kinds of different opinions of doing things. And like some people might want to put up pillars and you got these 4 fingers sticking up off the bottom of the tank. And I don't know how you can make that look natural. But if you can have an archway with a hole underneath, if you can have a cave that literally is dark, that something can go in and call home, that would be nice. If you have some twigs going off in different directions, that can be nice as long as nothing looks like it was stacked by man. That's where, I mean, they say nature hates a straight line. So when you're designing your tank, you want to stand back and look at it, and you might say, I don't like this. Or one thing, and I don't know why this is, but it's a fact, okay? It's not even a rumor, it's a fact. Women are great at aquascaping. I don't know why they're so good at it, but if you have a spouse or a girlfriend or a daughter, you can have them help you lay out their rock work. They may have some suggestions and ideas, and they may even say, can you move this one over? Can you lift that one a little higher? Can you take that one out? And you might find that they are exactly right. So I wouldn't rule them out as someone that can help you come up with a really good aquascape. Kevin says, cleanup crews for her algae. My hangum refugium just cannot keep up. 1 critter per gallon is what you need to keep the algae at bay in your tank. So that would be hermit crabs, that would be urchins, cucumbers, shrimp, snails, conchs, emerald crabs. I mean, you need a little bit of everything because they all have different diets and they all will do different parts to help benefit the whole system. Rasmus says, what type is your beautiful anemone with the long tentacles? Best from Italy. All my anemones, except for this one. This is a sea bay anemone that's in the background there. And that one, the tentacles are about that long with blue dots on the tip. All the other ones are actually bubble tip anemones that just don't have bubbles. And I don't know why, but they just mostly look long tentacled. Sage of Light says, what's your opinion on reactors versus media bags? I love reactors and I dislike media bags. I find that a bag with stuff in it just sitting in the corner of the sump or hanging in the back of a tank or wedged in the all-in-one, it's just kind of a passive filtration. The water may go through it or things might be absorbed into it initially, but then after a few days, the bag turns brown. It's covered in bacteria and stuff's not going to permeate it nearly as well as it did when it was a brand new clean mesh bag. So if you can put that media in a reactor where water flows through the media and then comes back into the system, it's going to be far more effective. And that's how I run my carbon. That's how I run biopellets. That's how I run a calcium reactor. They're all in reactors. So these are the ways to do it. I find them to be much more efficient. Emmanuel says, with Dwayne's frags, did you acclimate to his light of par? In the video you made, I only saw you glued them directly. I did not. Dwayne's lights are always they're way more intense than mine. He likes to run all this stuff at like 100% on all channels all day long. And I don't run my lights that way. My lights are running at 60%. So whatever we put in my tank, it was getting less than what his tank got, so it wasn't going to hurt them. Alex, thank you very much for the super chat. That was really nice of you. He said, thanks for being you. And that is me. All right, so let's end there. That was a good note to end on. I really appreciate that you guys tuned in today. I know I was gone for a couple of weeks. I don't believe I'll be gone for a while again. I believe my next trip is July. So we're good for many, many Saturdays. And we will have some good, solid topics to look forward to, or I will actually have something in mind. I want to remind you, today is Water Test Saturday. I've touched on it a couple times today, but I want to remind you, please do test your water. We want to check alkalinity, calcium, magnesium, nitrate, phosphate, temperature, pH, salinity, potassium, I don't know, what else? We want to check everything. Don't be lackadaisical, don't be lazy. Water tests save lives. This is something Caitlin said, and it's absolutely true. And if you keep up with your water testing, you will stay ahead of problems in your reef tank. And your reef tank will reflect that, and it'll look better and more beautiful every single day. And if you can do this consistently for 3 to 9 months, you'll see it really taking off, and then you keep it consistently for another year or two, and it's booming, and then suddenly you are tank of the month worthy, and it's because you did such a good job.